Howdy folks, I want to welcome you to the Campfire, a place where we can just sit and tell a story or two and we can ponder on the unusual and mysterious things that occur out here in the wild. I'll tell you some of my stories and well, you can tell me some of yours. This is Clay Steele. Come join me around the campfire here beneath the stars. Grab a cup of coffee or a cold drink and let's talk about our stories. Can't wait. I have an interesting story I'd like to share tonight. Well, it's about the contact between the critters that call the woods home and the people that work daily in that environment. Most times the interactions, they're without great consequence. They're just trying to keep a chipmunk out of your food supply, to having to break your car to avoid hitting a deer in the road, birds that you see, that kind of thing. Well, once you've been out here for a while, it just sort of flows together and it's all pretty much insignificant. It all sort of makes sense. It's nature. But sometimes things happen that just don't have an obvious explanation, right? So such it was for Ranger Elizabeth, Liz they called her, Garrett. She'd been with the Forest Service for 8 years now. 3 years of seasonal work. Now, seasonal workers, they get all the tough work, like bagging trash up and clearing brush out of campsites and trail work and weeding and cleaning and stocking the toilets for the summer tourists that come up to enjoy their national forests. So then 5 years back, she was lucky enough to get a full-time position, her dream job. She didn't have to do the grunge work that a seasonal hire had to do anymore, and she got to be in the woods year-round. Though most of it was in a guard shack now, and it was, tourist interaction. But there's so much more to see than just what happens in the summer. The fall, it brings the hunters and the best colors in the trees. Now the winter, it brings the hardy folks that they come up to play in the snow and get their cars stuck, of course, and in the spring is the explosion of bugs and plants and animals that they're all trying to interact and follow that driving force within all of us to reproduce and further our species. So the males, they strut and spar and they try anything to win the favor of the females, right? So it's such a crazy time in the wild that things don't always go as planned. There's a lot of emotions and a lot of hormones, right? So when Liz left her guard shack and locked up to go home for the night, she definitely misunderstood the meaning of the rabbit carcass on the hood of her car. Only about 100 foot away from her little office guard shack thing, the employee parking lot sat off the road behind a curtain of young trees. Though she could see where her Subaru was parked if she stepped out of the shack and looked back toward where the creek was, she didn't normally do that. And nobody ever had problems with theft or vandalism in that lot because it was off the road and really only a few staff members parked there. So she thought one of her colleagues did that as a prank. Not a funny prank, mind her, in her opinion, but then the seasonal workers were just starting to show up and she figured it was just one of the gang working off some pent-up energy after a long winter. She lifted the rabbit off her car and carried it down towards the creek. She laid its body there on a rock. She was sure that sometime before she got back to work in the morning, one of the many different scavengers would have made good use of this free protein. So she got in her Subaru and started home to her apartment. She didn't give it another thought, and nobody came forward to admit they'd done it. So it was just that a week later, she'd already put it out of her mind. She had a good day and was ready to go home. So she closed down, she locked the door and started out to the parking lot where her car was. Well, as she got close to her car, she saw something on the windshield. Her mind went right away to that rabbit from last week, but as she stepped up to the driver's side of a car, she saw a large bunch of wildflowers on the hood and up on the windshield there. Someone had plucked a huge bunch of Virginia bluebells and placed them on Liz's car. Though beautiful, it was nonetheless disturbing, taken with the events of last week with the rabbit. Now this became a problem. Someone was scaring Liz. She looked around, all the way around. She shivered. She wondered to herself, did she have a stalker? Who was it? Was he watching her right now? She grabbed the flowers and threw them off to the side of her car. All of a sudden scared, she opened her door and she got in and she locked her doors. She was overcome with emotion. She started to lose it. A few tears started down her cheeks. And when she got a hold of herself, firmly telling herself out loud, you're strong, way stronger than this. With newfound determination, she started that car up and backed out of her parking spot and drove for home. Always a thinker. She did her best thinking while driving. Oh, a lot of us do. I do. Flowers and a dead rabbit. Those two things don't go together, no matter what. Well, they didn't naturally put themselves on my car, so someone did. So I'll set a trap, and I'll catch them. Now, Liz was an amateur photographer, and a good one. A few of her images had made it to the local paper, and one was in a national parks pamphlet. And she, if anyone, understood the power of a photograph. She had a trail camera, and I think y'all know what that is. You know, you tie it onto a tree, and it's got batteries in it and a camera built into this body, and when something gets close enough to trip the beam, it takes a photo of it or video. And heck, they got nice ones now that take infrared photos, all kinds of stuff. So she had one of those, and she was going to set it up inside her car, and she would catch the person that was messing with her. If she wanted to, she could turn them into HR, and they might lose their job. At the very least, she could make them stop leaving things on her Subaru. Well, now she had a plan. She celebrated with her favorite vegan dinner and slept like a baby that night. The next day, she parked in her normal spot, set up the camera so that it was hidden in the back seat and the prankster wouldn't see it. She went into her booth and didn't look back at the car all day long. She was a little disappointed that night when she only had pictures of a chipmunk jumping on the hood 11 times and a few birds that tripped the sensors on the trail cam. In fact, that's the way it was all the rest of the week. But Friday, hoo boy, what a surprise. She walked out to her car at the end of the day, not expecting to find anything there. But when she sat down in the driver's seat, she looked up through the windshield and she could see that someone had smeared something all over the glass. What the hell? That's nasty, she said. She got out and cleaned the mess off the windshield with paper towels and Windex she kept in the back of her car. Not knowing what it was that she cleaned off, she threw the towels away in the trash can at the head of the lot, got in and drove home, thinking to herself that she would turn this creep in and hope he lost his job. Who knows what he had smeared all over her window. Well, she got home and pulled the chip out of the camera, inserted it into her computer, and got the shock of her life. There were 119 separate still pictures of a large, hairy face that only a mom could love, kissing and licking and generally making out with the windshield of her Subaru. A few pictures showed the creature was smelling the door frame with eyes closed. Now, I don't think Liz really got what happened here. You see, the first 3 years she worked in the park, she spent all of her time outdoors, and it was sometime during the third year when the Bigfoot, and that's what he is, crossed paths with the park ranger. You see, Liz is one of those natural women, sort of a modern hippie, Humboldt honey they call him in Northern Cal. She didn't shave at all, she wore no modern chemical deodorants or perfumes, and she washed her clothes with clean natural soaps. Basically a healthy woman. Now this is what caught the eye of this young male Sasquatch. She smelled good, she looked good, and she never was with a mate. She was available, right? So it was that he set out to impress her. The rabbit was a gift to prove his hunting prowess, the bluebells for the beauty, and finally overcome with lust, he couldn't hold back, and he gave a display of affection, loving on her car, spurred on by her scent inside the car. She told her boss, who then moved to put lighting in the parking lot, and approved Liz to move to a different location at the other end of the park. Now the beast, with a broken heart, he moved on. He's probably still roaming the forest, always in search of his lost love. Every once in a while, the whiff of patchouli will get him excited, and with some high hopes he will track the smell, only to be disappointed again. So you see, folks, another one of life's lessons. Even if we think we may have found that one, love is a two-way street. Now take care of yourselves. I will be here next time you can make it to the campfire. Until then, this is Clay Steele. Good night. Hey friends, how you doing tonight? Well, I'm on my third cup of coffee and I'm antsy to get started here, so if you've come to share some stories tonight, then come on over and find a spot around the fire. Sit down and relax with a cup of something that brings you pleasure. By the time the fire burns down and we have all had the chance to share some stories, we should know each other a little better. Well, that's what these campfires are all about. Bonding. Even if it's just that you get to know yourself a little better. Now, how can that not be a good thing? Well, let me start. I've got an update story to tell you. Do you remember Liz, the forest ranger? How I told you about her having that secret admirer? Well, after her game camera showed that a young male squatch had left gifts on her car and was apparently enamored with her, well, if you do, then you'll remember that she requested and was given a reassignment to the other end of the park. She didn't show her bosses any of the 119 pictures she had of the hairy face kissing her Subaru because she didn't want trouble. She was a nature lover and there wasn't any real damage, so she figured that a new start in a new area of the park 20 miles downstream would be the best move. And it worked for her. It had been about 6 months since she started as a supervisor of sorts. She had a Park Service pickup and she was to drive to all the remote facilities in this region and write inspection reports. Sort of look for trails that needed repair or broken picnic tables, watch for any conflicts that tourists might occur. She was good in this position and she really took her job seriously. She often found herself parking the truck and walking 2 or 3 miles just to inspect a remote tourist feature somewhere. And so it was that she found herself a mile up the trail from the trailhead and almost to the river overlook, where the trail came out of the trees and brush to look over a beautiful river canyon. Almost 100 yards down a brushy hillside was the river, and it was a foamy, boiling river with deep, dark pools and occasional waterfalls. So Liz stood out at the overlook and took in the sweeping views. It's beautiful. Made it all worthwhile. But she wasn't the only one there that day. Nope. 3 lives were about to cross paths, and it would be life-changing for all 3. 6 months back, after the Sasquatch couldn't find the Subaru, where it had been parked every day for years, and he didn't smell the patchouli oil that was the aura that surrounded the most intriguing creature he had ever seen, he became a little despondent and sort of wandered aimlessly, just hiding and surviving. So it was that he found himself at a low bank section of the river below a pretty good sized waterfall at the edge of a large dark pool and the head of a long set of rapids. Though he was always on alert, Bigfoot have to be, you know. Because of the sounds from the moving water, he just wasn't aware that he was being stalked. A large, dangerous, 35-year-old dominant male squatch with burning red eyes was slowly creeping up on him from directly behind, with murder on his mind. Just 20 feet away, and the squatting young male half turned in just in time to see the large form rushing him with a pine limb held as a club, instinctively turning away and taking the club on the shoulder kind of as a glancing blow, saved the young male's life. The force of the murderous rush from the large male carried them both into the river, When he hit the water, he instinctively dove down into the dark pool. If it weren't such a dark, moonless night, he may have been found and murdered by the dominant male. The Sasquatch was trying to kill his competition for any breeding females. Well, this is the way of nature. It has been for all of time. Probably always will be. Well, the young Bigfoot worked his way downriver, staying as close to the bottom as he could. He knew the danger if he was found, especially with a wounded shoulder from that club. Well, holding his breath, he made it through the rapids and surfaced under an overhanging bank covered by willows. Out of sight, he recovered his breath and he tried to locate his attacker using his sharp senses. Well, he stayed in his hideout for a good half hour. Not wanting to be found there in the daylight, he knew he would have to take the risk of getting caught and move away from where he was. He figured the most concealment could be found in the river, and going upriver was impossible because of the rapids and the waterfall, so downriver was the best chance of survival. So, taking a big breath, he submerged and kicked away from the bank. He surfaced near rocks and logs and would get another breath and resubmerge and move on down the river in that way. He traveled this way for about an hour and a half until he got to the top of a waterfall, and he was forced to get out of the river and portage the falls. He rested there on the bank and he fell into a deep sleep. He woke at dawn and got up and moved into some thick brush to sleep most of the day away. His injury hurt and sleeping seemed to be the best thing he could do. So he packed some mud on the shoulder, and that usually helps, and went and laid down. Well, moving at night and resting often, he continued downriver for several days. Then, leaving the river canyon, he climbed to a rocky knob to rest there. There weren't any tourists up there. He went in to rest for the day. Now that gets two of them in the same location, and now for the third. Odin Doddle, what a waste of a life. He cared for nothing, he loved nothing, and he did nothing constructive. In fact, the opposite applied. He hated everything and he destroyed everything that crossed his path. He was a murderer, a rapist, and represented everything that was evil on this planet. He had been released early from his latest stint in federal prison. Apparently, he displayed good behavior while incarcerated. Shuffled to a halfway house where he stayed several weeks until he could cut his ankle monitor off and leave town in a hurry. It was 6 hours before he was missed, but by that time he was long gone, 300 miles away. Catching a ride at the truck stop, he rode till the trucker stopped for the day. He began walking then. It wasn't unusual to see walkers and hikers this close to the mountains. He attracted very little attention as he climbed the winding country road. Staying in the shadows when he heard a car approaching, he was able to get to the trailhead for the canyon outlook in just 4 days total. And that is how we now have the 3 participants in this fateful event about to cross paths. Waking up in the late afternoon, fully rested from sleeping all day on that rocky knob, he began to stretch his shoulders and was much better and had healed nicely since his attack 4 days back. He watched the small birds flitting about, and then there it was. A familiar smell. From the back of his mind came all the emotions associated with it. There was hope, there was happiness, and there was loss and despair. Curious, he moved to the edge of the rocky knob, and there below him, on the trail, was Liz. She had left her truck in the lot and walked the mile up to the overlook when the Bigfoot smelled her familiar scent. Natural soaps and patchouli oil. They were very distinctive in the wild. At the same time that he saw Liz, he saw another human behind her and closing fast. From his vantage point above and slightly behind, he had a good view of the 2 hikers. This wasn't new for Ogun. Though skinny, he was wiry strong, and he could easily overpower the ranger. The element of surprise was important in the taking of his victims. What would he do to this one? He didn't know. He sort of became a different person when this happened. One thing for sure is his victims always suffered. They always felt his hatred for life, and they always died, begging to live. His pace quickened as he closed the gap on the Ranger. He reached out and he grabbed her around the waist from behind, pinning her arms at her side in the embrace. Liz was taken by surprise, so taken by the panorama before her that she didn't hear the maniac's last rush. She struggled, but she was at a huge disadvantage. She was following the same path as Odin Doddle's victims. Time was critical now. In a few minutes, she'd be lost. But what she had that the others didn't was a very mad, very large, and hugely physical Bigfoot to intervene. Sensing trouble in the way the man had approached the Ranger, and now with Liz struggling, the young Squatch became the beast that he always was. He jumped down the hill to the trail in 2 giant leaps. Then, moving with the speed that only a crazy mad giant has, he hit that maniac and, prying him from his victim, continued off the trail and down the brushy slope towards a river, moving at a run while holding the criminal around the waist and dragging him through the brush, making ungodly, scary sounds as they went. It had all happened so fast for Liz that she wasn't really sure what had happened. First, a person grabbed her from behind for no reason, then held her and wouldn't let her go. Well, what she remembered most about him was his strong grip and his terrible breath. It smelled like death. And she wasn't wrong, but it wasn't her death this time. Odin hit the water backwards. Still in the grasp of the giant, he got to look into the face of the one that would take his life. And all of his victims would have been really happy to know he was scared. He screamed all the way down the hill. The beast took him to the bottom of the dark pool and broke quite a few bones in that evil bastard's body. He was just a limp bag of flesh when that Bigfoot surfaced with the lifeless Odin. Dragging and carrying the body, the still enraged Sasquatch set off for a place to bury the body so that it would never be found. Bigfoot seemed to have that knowledge naturally. Well, it took a few minutes for Liz to catch her breath. Quite an adrenaline rush she had. She watched as the beast ran off with her attacker and took him underwater. Also surreal. She had never seen an animal move that fast. And what of it? Twice in 1 year that she had an encounter with a Sasquatch? That's crazy. Most people have, 0 encounters in their lifetime. And why hadn't it injured her? I mean, it seemed like it wasn't even interested in her. Very strange and scary. Not just a cryptid encounter, but it had killed a man. What should I do, she wondered. What do I report? She gathered herself up and walked back to her truck. She was in a much better shape when she walked the mile back to the trailhead. Along the way, she'd made the decision to not make the report today. First of all, it was a fantastic story, and who would believe it? There was no body, and there was no blood. And on top of that, the beast had saved her from the crazy guy. So if she reported him, they would come and they would hunt him, and something about that didn't set well with Liz. There were no other vehicles in the parking lot as Liz drove her Park Service truck out onto the road and headed home. So, do you think Liz understood yet that this might be the same critter that had slobbered on her Subaru? She does seem a little slow on the uptake, huh? Maybe with a little time it'll come to her. That's sort of the way life is, friends. Some things that are a little obvious to some of us may not make any sense to others. And that's why it's important here to be a little tolerant, especially with so many crazy things going on in the world right now. Well, I've had enough tonight, folks, so I'm going to leave you here at the fire. As always, I enjoyed your company, and I look forward to our next campfire. Till then, this is Clay Steele. Now, be good to yourselves. Well, howdy, friends. Awful good to see you. It was a heck of a summer. How's it treating you and your family? I'm hoping you're all doing well. Are you here for camaraderie and stories around the campfire? Well, if you are, then fill your mug with something good to drink and find a place around the fire. I've got another story about Forest Ranger Liz. You remember her? Well, she's the ranger that had drawn the attention of that young male squatch. He heaped flowers on her parked car, and it freaked her out enough to ask for a reassignment within the forest district. Well, she was moved miles away and was lucky when by chance the beast and she crossed paths again, undoubtedly saving her life. Well, you can find those stories and others here on the Hidden Corners podcast. Well, so old Liz is just working her way through the summer. Remember, her job is sort of a supervisory position where she travels her end of the district and inspects facilities and tourist sites. She's always looking for something that needs repair, and she'll write up a report, and then someone else goes to repair it eventually. Now, she really cares about the forest, and she really cares about her job. She thinks it's important for the tourists to have a good experience, you know. The forest belongs to all of us, and she's just working there so that we can enjoy it. And she realizes that. So she stays on top of things. Liz really goes the extra mile for the Forest Service. She's just a good employee to have. Well, the summer brings the tourists and the traffic, and the whole forest is alive with the plants and animals, and their busiest time of the year. With all that, we also have summer thunderstorms and wildfires. Wildfires are one of the most destructive things that can happen in these woods. So it was on a Tuesday evening in August, during an especially active thunderstorm with many lightning strikes. Quite a few small fires were started because of those strikes. And because they're out towards the wilderness area within the park, there were no roads within a couple miles of the fires. So the fires would have to be fought, by hot shots. And these are hand crews that are mobilized via helicopter or even sometimes they'll parachute in. These men and women are often the first ones on the fire line, and sometimes the only ones there. With help from airborne assets like helicopters and fixed-wing airplanes that drop retardant and they drop water. And, of course, the hand crews, and they build a line that the fire will not cross, and eventually it would die off. So at the very least, they're slowing the fire growth down in the early parts of the fire, which are important. And these guys and these men and women are really invaluable. Well, Liz could hear the chatter on the Forest Service radio in her pickup. It might be several hours and maybe not until tomorrow morning before the weather was such that the helicopters could fly the hot shots into the fire zone. Well, she knew the fires were several miles from most of the tourist facilities, but there were a few remote pit toilet buildings near the trailheads, parking lots and trailheads, at the end of her district. Now, she knew that it would be best to lower the steel fire curtains on those bathrooms. If nothing else, it'll keep the ashes and the embers out of the inside of the bathrooms. Even if the building burns down, you just can't do much about that. Well, just in case, it's best to lower those curtains. She also knew that if she wanted it done, that she'd have to do it herself. But by the time that she made a report and made its way through the normal channels, it could be 2 days. Besides, Wednesday and Thursday were normal days off, and she didn't want to go back to the office this afternoon. She'd just go out and lower the curtains herself, then she'd write a report when she got back on Friday. Piece of cake, right? Well, how many times have we said that, then things turn south? Well, she sat herself up for the real trouble because she didn't tell anyone where she was going. She pulled into the parking lot at the trailhead where the toilets were, then lowered the fire curtains into place with no problems. Then she thought, she'd walk out that trail about a quarter mile to a clear area, there was no trees in there, where she could look across the valley and see the mountain where the fires were. kind of give her a better idea what's going on. Once again, without telling anyone where she was headed off to, she went. The view was fantastic from the clearing, and she could see a lot of the mountain from where she was, and if she were just to go down the slope a little bit, maybe 100 foot or so, she'd be able to see around the trees that were in the way where the trail was crossed through the clearing. So she worked her way down the slope carefully, right? Because it was wet and it was mossy. It was on a hard rock face, and that's why there were no trees there. It was a rock outcropping, and it was where water was coming out, springing out, and so it was covered with moss and slick. Well, just as she reached out with her foot for a solid foothold, she's taking 1 foot at a time, two things happened at the same time. A grouse exploded seemingly out of the ground itself, just a few feet in front of her, and she lost her footing all at the same time. She smacked that rock face hard right behind the ear. She slipped and fell out, and she was instantly knocked out cold. She'd really got herself in a pickle this time. It seemed like forever to Liz. No memory of what had happened. Sort of like starting over. She slowly became aware as she woke up, groggy and sore all over. She wasn't sure where she was. It seemed like she was on her back in a dark cave. She sure didn't know how she got there, and really didn't know where she was, so it was just, yeah, she tried to move, but everything hurt too much. She gave in to the pain, and everything went black. Out she went. It was about 5 hours later, about 10 in the morning, and she woke up again. She was confused, but she had a little more awareness. Everything hurt. Her head, her shoulder, her back, all where she had slipped and fell against that rock slope. Well, the morning light was filtering in the cave, and it made it no doubt that she was in a cave. She saw enough around her. She felt comfortable, too. Too comfortable for the rock and the dirt floor. Well, that's because she was laying on a carefully built bed of pine boughs, thickly covered with moss. She managed to sit up, and she nearly passed out again. But she fought through it till things became clear, and she was able to focus her eyes, looking around. She was in a room-sized cave, almost 20 foot square, and the opening was around a corner where the light came from. Now, on a crudely split log laying right next to her was a gourd filled with clean water and a mat of moss covered with service berries and currants. Well, when she sat up, a primitive bandage fell from her head, and it was a mass of moss saturated with what looked like pulverized arnica flowers. So arnica, it's in the sunflower family, and it has healing powers. The poultice had helped her scalp to heal and kept the infection at bay. Now, who had brought her here and bandaged her head? Who had built the bed she lay on? Where was she? She was pretty confused, but aware that she must get to her truck and get to a doctor. Eating some berries and drinking deeply from the gourd was helping her to feel better. She felt strong enough to stand and try to walk. It took a while, but even with a splitting headache and a sore body, she made it to the cave mouth, and it appeared to be on the slope, similar to where she fell. It was fairly steep, and in fact, she was only about a mile upslope from where she went down. She didn't know that at the time, but she still didn't know where she was, but she stepped out onto the slope away from the cave mouth and looked around to get her bearings. As she was studying her surroundings, she saw what looked like a flower on the forest floor, about 50 feet away. It was a yellow flower with a yellow center, an arnica, like the poultice was made of. Well, she slowly walked to it, and as she got a few feet away, she saw that it had been placed there. It wasn't growing there. It had been pulled or cut, and it was laying on the floor, on the dirt. And looking beyond it is what appeared to be another one about 50 foot or so away in the same direction, down and to the left through the trees, sort of like at a 45-degree angle, downhill and then side hill, kind of midway. Well, she followed this same pattern of flowers placed in a line that led her almost a mile down the mountain. slowly and taking great caution not to fall again, until she sighted what looked to be a building ahead through the trees. In fact, it was the bathroom where she started yesterday. All of a sudden, overcome with emotions, Liz began to shake and cry. She stopped for a couple minutes and just let herself go. She couldn't see to walk, so she stood where she was, and she just shook. Regaining her composure, she wiped her eyes and made the last couple 100 feet to her pickup truck. Because she'd told no one of her intentions when she left work yesterday, and it being her day off, she wasn't missed. The fire on this edge of the park had kept visitors from coming this way to use the trailhead. And the service had also, in fact, thrown up barricades in the road at the bottom of the hill about 2.5 miles back down the road to discourage tourists from coming up this way. So no one had seen the Forest Service truck in the parking lot and made an inquiry on why I was there. Liz had sort of kidnapped herself. Well, she got the truck going and made it by the barricades and into town to the Medi-Center. And they were able to get her right in, and it was determined she had a concussion. It took 10 stitches to close the wound, and they took an x-ray to look for clotting, which there was none. So they recommended bed rest and sent her away with a couple of prescriptions. She went home, and she decided she'd wait till tomorrow to call her boss and try to explain everything. Hell, she needed that time to try to figure out what really happened anyway. She remembered the fall, then waking up in the cave, and following the trail of arnicas back to the parking lot. She remembered how overwhelming it was to see something so familiar and safe as her truck. She remembered seeing the fire shutters down on the toilets and the sign for the loop trail in the parking lot. What she hadn't seen was the tall, hairy beast standing just back in the tree line as she drove slowly out of the lot. In fact, she'd been so intent with following the trail of yellow flowers that she hadn't seen him follow her from the cave to the trailhead. Now, Liz was lucky. Someone or something was there to help her when she fell, and she'd got herself into a corner by not telling anyone where she was headed. Not smart, folks. Well, do you think she has any idea what it was that rescued her and possibly saved her life? Again. Do you think she'll remember? Poor Liz. Seems like she's got to figure this out eventually. One thing's for sure, where possible, have a contingency plan. You'd have too many people that'd miss you. Well, I'm heading off now. It's been a good evening around this campfire. You're a good group. Until the next time, this is Clay Steele. Be good to people. Well, evening, folks. How are you doing? This is a perfect night for a campfire. The temperatures are cooler now, and the heat from the fire feels real good. And you all seem to be wearing heavier clothes tonight. You're holding your mugs with both hands. Boy, I just love this time of year. See, we seem to get a larger crowd around our campfires, and the stories are more plentiful. So fill your mugs, and let's share some stories. How's our forest ranger Liz doing? Well, old Liz, she's been thinking about some things. A lot. And it's about time. She had one of those midnight epiphanies. Now, you ever have one of those? It happens to me. It starts as a dream where the characters, they're players in my life, and they're dealing with problems in my life and in the dream, and when somehow their actions, they just clear as a log jam. Like everything becomes clear. And I usually wake up with a feeling of accomplishment. And it takes a while to get back to sleep. And then when I wake up in the morning, I'm tired, but less stressed. And that is what happened to old Liz. She's been trying to put together the thoughts of the last year. She thought that her first encounter with Bigfoot was the trail cam pictures of a large, youngish male obscenely licking and kissing her parked Subaru. Do you remember that? Well, did that creature leave the flowers on the car? Was he responsible for the rabbit? Then months later, when she was rescued from the attacker on the river overlook trail, was that the same creature that hauled that crazy man down the hill and disappeared into the river? Could it be the same one? Well, did she have a protector? And what were his intentions? Is this who or what had carried her to the cave and treated her wounds when she fell and knocked herself out? And then why? So many questions she had. Weren't Sasquatch killers? Certainly she'd seen one kill a man. But she never felt threatened. In fact, she really felt safe around this beast. Now, certainly this creature, if it were just one creature, must have been around her pretty often to have saved her twice. Was it always there? And was it following her? Extremely curious now, Liz was determined to find out more about this beast behind these encounters. So, as she had her granola and fruit breakfast that morning before work, she decided that since she was a scientist, she'd approach this a scientific way. She'd look for evidence, gather it, and then with an open mind, and she would make a decision on what was going on with this thing. She'd need to read up a bit on the subject, and to get her own data, she'd have to set up some trail cameras, which she'd used before. Well, remember when she got the 119 images of the creature caressing her car? Well, she knew of at least the 3 different places where she herself had contact with this beast. Or at least she thought so. Well, she'd start there, at those places. That made sense. Now, with the confidence of a person with a plan, she cleaned up the kitchen and she readied herself for work. And before she left the house, she brought out her 2 trail cameras. She checked the memory chips and the battery life, and she determined to figure out and settle her curiosity once and for all. She drove the long way to the office. That wasn't unusual because she spent much of her time in the field anyway. So the park ranger stopped at several different facilities and tourist attractions as the morning progressed. That's her normal job, is to inspect for needed repairs. You know, she was good at her job and she enjoyed being outdoors. She didn't miss much either. She found several areas that needed attention from the trail crews and some carpentry work where some tourist vehicle had pushed over a couple of fence posts on the edge of a parking lot. Not much more than that this morning. The tourists hadn't been too wild lately. Things had kind of slowed down. See, the summer was coming to an end. The days were getting a little shorter, just noticeably, and the kids were back in school. And that, in conjunction with that, and the colder nights, this was the best time to enjoy the woods. And Liz was certainly enjoying herself while she was making the rounds. When eventually she found herself in the parking lot, near the pit toilets at the trailhead, where she had slipped and fell a few weeks back. Do you remember that? Well, it was quite a dramatic effect when she awoke in a cave a mile from the parking lot with her head wound was bandaged and treated with poultice. And she had no memory of how she got there in that cave. Well, she parked her Forest Service pickup and found herself staring at the bathroom buildings. The maintenance staff had raised the fire curtains since she had last been there. And not sure where her newfound courage came from, she decided to hike up the mountain to the outcrop at the ridge top and ultimately to the cave where she found herself when she regained consciousness several weeks back. So she got her backpack out and she put on her duty belt where she carried a Forest Service radio, a flashlight, and some pretty strong bear spray. And in her pack, she carried water and trail food and a thermal shelter and one of her game cameras. She locked the truck and set out. And this time, however, having learned from the past, she left a note on the dash describing her direction of travel. Good thinking, Liz. She set out past the toilets and she started up the hill. Navigating from memory, she climbed through the tall trees for, about 45 minutes. She stopped frequently to catch her breath and just look around and enjoy the forest. There was lots of birds flying around today, and she saw more than a few squirrels and chipmunks. They were working hard to gather up for a winter store. She wasn't following a trail. Where she walked was just pine needles and fallen limbs. The forest was pretty open underneath the canopy of these large trees. She knew she would eventually come to the rocky ridge top, and from there she would travel up and down the ridge until she found that rocky outcrop where the cave was. Now, Liz wasn't sure what she'd find there, but she knew that she just had to see it to satisfy her curious mind. That was like a check the box kind of a thing for her at that point. Well, the ranger hit the ridge after about another 30 minutes of walking, then spent about 20 minutes going up and down until she found the cave entrance. It was in a large outcropping of big bouldery rocks. Well, she cautiously approached the opening. She had her flashlight in one hand and she had her bear spray in the other. She didn't really need either one. The cave was shallow and it was empty. Kind of a disappointment. Not really the way she had remembered it, but then again, she was with a head injury and in a concussive state. I've been there, folks. You kind of do things in a dreamlike state. Has that ever happened to you? Well, Liz was a little disappointed that she hadn't found more answers here in this cave. There was no evidence of her ever being there. No bed of pine boughs, no gourd of water, no nuts and berries, and no sign of any yellow flowers. Oh, she was sure it happened, and Liz was definitely sure that it was here in this cave where she had been carried and put in a bed to heal, but who or what was still a mystery. Okay, now I'm going to set a camera, but I don't think that this is the place to do it. See, there's no sign of any use of this cave. That's what she was thinking. No, it seems that the only time I've been visited by Bigfoot is when I was in need, except for when I got the first pictures from the trail camera in my Subaru. So, if I can't catch him by surprise, then I'll let him come to me. Now, sometimes the craziest ideas make sense to us because of the crazy circumstances we find ourselves in. And so it was that our Liz, the heroine of our story, the level-headed park ranger that she was, came up with a plan. She would use herself as bait. Liz would set up camp and hope to be visited by the creature. Now, I told you it was crazy. She was that curious. She really wanted to be sure, one way or another, whether there was a Bigfoot that was following her, and what exactly were his intentions. Now, the creature had ample opportunity to hurt her if he'd wished to, and was capable of harm to a human. Well, she witnessed that firsthand. Liz really believed that she wasn't in danger from the beast that she had encountered several times before. So her plan was simple. She would camp out alone and spend time walking in the woods. That way, she would have the most exposure to the beast. And the best location in Liz's mind was a remote spot that was rarely visited by tourists. In fact, most people didn't know about it. It was sort of a park ranger secret spot. Well, she would get dropped off and backpack for 2 days into this beautiful location that had a small lake with a clean, cold creek fed into it. She'd camped there before, and because it was off the main trail system, it was just rarely visited. It had everything with fresh water from the creek, and it had trout from the lake, and wild onions, and miner's lettuce in the meadow near the big sandy beach where she'd set up camp. Now, Liz arranged for 5 days off, which she had coming, and that gives her 9 days total if you figure the weekends on either end of that. And she talked a girlfriend into giving her a ride to drop her off at Trailhead. And she just told the girlfriend, who had a lot of questions, she said she just needed some time alone. Yeah, it worked out. She set off and she had a good couple days hike into the lake. It was beautiful, just as she expected, and Liz was already glad she'd come, regardless of what might happen. It was a great campsite and the fishing was good. The trout would rise to the surface and they'd take just about any fly that she would present them. Kind of paradise, folks. It was the second afternoon she'd been in her camp at the lake. Liz had been on a nice day hike and had covered close to 5 miles. She'd circled the lake and she'd walked the creek to its source. It was a spring in the rocks where it just poured out. It was just beautiful, and the water so cold and clear. And gosh, if you've ever found one of those springs, and most of you have, gosh, drink some of that water, fill your jug, whatever you got with you, your canteen, and that's always the best water, good mineral water. Well, she also, along the way, she'd harvested some edible greens for dinner. She was tired and dirty from the hike, and she decided a good dip in the lake is what she needed. Well, she was alone at the lake, and in fact, she hadn't seen anybody since she'd been dropped off 4 days before. Like I said, paradise. She stripped down and she washed out her clothes with the lake water and hanging them over bushes to dry in the afternoon sun. She then waded out in the cold lake water and began to scrub clean the dust and the dirt from her body. She'd always used biodegradable cleansers so as not to pollute. And so it really worked out pretty good for her. Oh, she had such a good time. She frolicked around in that lake for 20 minutes. Though cold, it felt so good on her tired body that she just didn't want to get out. Then at some point, the cold finally got her, and she decided to get out. It was then, while swimming toward camp, but she got a shock that stopped her right where she was. There, standing on the beach, with the shirt she had set out to dry in its hand, was the most magnificent creature she'd ever seen. 8 foot tall and 3.5 foot wide, covered mostly in long, reddish-brown hair. It stood facing her, in what she felt was sort of a non-threatening stance. Motionless and without any sound, he just stood there and stared at her as she treaded water. They both kept this up for a good, 5 minutes. Liz, being cold, finally decided to act. She slowly swam towards the beach, straight towards the beast. He didn't move. He just stood holding her shirt in his huge hand. And when she was about 30 foot from shore, her feet struck bottom, with her eyes locked on the intruder's eyes. She slowly took steps toward him. She stopped only about 15 feet between them. She stood, fully exposed in dripping water from the lake. They stayed eyes locked facing each other for a full 10 count. Then the beast's eyes took her in head to toe, and he slowly turned and walked back into the dark woods where he'd come from. As he was turning, Liz thought she was sure she saw a slight smile begin to form on his face. Liz, for her part, released a huge breath and closed her eyes. Now sure that her Bigfoot meant her no harm, she walked forward to finish drying and get herself dressed. While dressing, she realized that he still had her shirt in his hand when he turned to leave. Damn, she thought, one of my favorites, a long-sleeved concert shirt she'd bought at a reggae fest. Well, she'd just have to forget about that. It was gone. So she busied herself getting dinner prepped, and she caught 3 nice trout and cooked them over the fire on a stick through the gills. Served with greens that she had gathered, it was a great meal. As she sat by the campfire with her mug of tea, she reflected on the trip so far. Not sure what it all meant, but convinced that he meant her no harm. In fact, this beast may have saved her life more than once. These thoughts were still in her head when she fell asleep that night. Knowing what she knew now, what would she do next? What would you do? I know that's a lot to figure, so let's just call it a night for Liz. Next time we get together, we'll talk about our forest ranger, Liz. For now, let's refill our mugs and we'll enjoy this evening's campfire. I'm glad you were all here this evening. We're all better for the company. I'm already looking forward to our next get-together. And until then, this is Clay Steele. Be someone's friend. They might need you. Well, there you are. It's good to see you. I'm glad you decided to stop by and enjoy this campfire with us. As always, we all have a mug of something good to drink, and we're all looking forward to sharing some stories. Fall is here, the nights are cooler, and the fire feels just great. So find yourself a spot here, and I'll bet you can get someone to make room for you, and let's get started with a story. I want to let you know what Liz has been up to. We all know Liz, that forest ranger with a once secret admirer that just recently revealed himself. In fact, Liz also revealed herself to this beast when she walked out of the lake into the shallows while bathing. From 15 feet away, they looked at each other, then the Bigfoot turned and he disappeared into the forest. Now listen, but I've already told you that story. You can find it and the others in the library here on the Hidden Corners podcast. And I want to tell you what Liz has been up to since then. She stayed one more night at her campsite at the lake. She didn't see any signs of the beast after their first contact, but she felt a certain presence in the air as if he were still nearby. It didn't make her nervous anymore. She's pretty much convinced that Bigfoot, at least this one, meant her no harm. He seemed to be a protector of sorts. Wouldn't that be something? Who wouldn't want an 8-foot bodyguard? Even with all she had learned recently, Liz had lots of questions. We weren't taught to believe that this Bigfoot creature wasn't anything but dangerous to humans. There are just too many stories of interactions between the beasts and people that didn't turn out good for the people. Sasquatch and the other variants just seemed to be angry and violent all the time. But that wasn't this ranger's experience. She'd been rescued twice by this beast who had several chances to do her harm if that was what he wanted to do. So with an air of curiosity and interest, our ranger began her hike out to the trailhead. It had taken 2 days to get her into the campsite by the lake, and it would take her 2 days walking to get out. The first day's hike went well, and she stopped for night at the well-used campsite beside a small creek. It was only about 6 miles from the trailhead, in the parking lot where she had arranged to be picked up by her girlfriend. After dinner, she sat down by the campfire with her back against the log and with her mug of tea, and she thought about things long enough to decide that she would do what it took to figure this out. She realized that she was in a unique situation. And to learn about the Sasquatch was first-hand information. It would be a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and for whatever reason it was offered to her. Well, she decided she would accept it. She slept well that night and had a good walk out. Her friend met her in the parking lot as arranged, and as they loaded her backpack into the back of the car, she asked about the week-long trip. Curious how it went for Liz. Now, the ranger just told her friend that it was a good time and a good hike and much-needed vacation. She wasn't really ready to share just yet. Most people wouldn't really understand the relationship with the beast. Liz decided she would keep this part of her life private. Excited to see what might happen next, she prepared herself to return to work. And for the next 2 weeks, Liz was so busy at work that she didn't give much thought to her big friend. She had season-end reports to write and was busy with all the last-minute preparations for the fall hunting season, which required facility inspections and trail maintenance and all that stuff. So it was in the middle of October when the hunters were in the woods, and just after the first snowstorm had come and gone, that the ranger ran into the beast again. Liz was following up on a problem bear report. That is, some hunters had a bear tear up their campsite while they were all out hunting. The bear made a mess of things, breaking into 2 trucks and a camper, besides eating their food supplies. The worst of it was that a pet dog belonging to one of the group had been killed and half eaten by the Bruin. The hunters said it was big, judging by the tracks it left and the damage it had committed. The ranger was used to this type of service call, and as there was a fair amount of human-wildlife conflicts in her district. Normally, the problem bear was to be observed if possible, pictures taken to identify it. Then, if deemed a threat, it would be relocated if possible. Really, only a small percentage of these bears are destroyed. Well, where this event took place was a particularly brushy drainage. The campsite was at the extreme end of a dirt road near a small creek that ran through the drainage bottom. As Ranger Liz drove into the campsite, evidence of the raid on the camp was still evident, though the hunters had been working on cleaning up the carnage. There was glass from a broken window on the Ford F-250, while the Dodge Ram had the door itself twisted away from the door frame. The camper showed the most damage, however, where the bear had decided to tear in through the wall itself. shredding aluminum siding and 2x2s to get into the barking dog. It was a sobering scene where it was obvious the dog had been killed and carried to the center of camp near the still smoking fire ring and partially eaten. The dog's owner had wrapped his pet in a blanket and had put his remains in a large Yeti cooler. He wanted to take the body home and have it cremated. The ranger gave her condolences and began her investigation. She was able to get a few hair samples from the Dodge pickup and took quite a few photos of the damage. The ferocity of the attack seemed unusual, and most significantly, the footprints in the dirt around camp were huge, though it was thought in this area that only black bears could be found. The last grizzly was killed 80 years or so back. Though not impossible, certainly unheard of. There are ways to tell the difference between black bears and grizzlies by their tracks. The claws are longer and the front foot is more square on a grizzly. That and the size had the hairs standing up on this ranger's neck. For all of the signs pointed to this being a fairly large grizzly bear. The hair sample would confirm the ranger's observations. Well, the hunters were now breaking camp and they were going to head home. They had their spirits broken. Liz decided she would close their campsite and barricade the dirt road where it left the main road until they could find this destructive Bruin. They told Ranger Liz that they would be caravanning out in about an hour. With this information, Liz decided to do a little scouting around and see if she could determine what direction the bear had come from and, more importantly, which direction it had gone. All that the Park Service issued this ranger for protection against wildlife was her bear spray. It was good stuff, however, 2.5% capsicum. She carried it on her belt with her flashlight and a folding buck knife. Definitely underarm for grizzly, but then this bear had probably ran off when the hunters returned to camp and was likely scared of humans. Since this remote campsite was down in the brushy drainage, her service radio was out of contact with the office or any of the other personnel. And since she would be heading back within the hour, she reasoned she would just do a short circle around camp. Now, do we see Ranger Liz setting herself up again? Man, oh man, I bet she wishes she could have that one back. As the camp was being hastily packed away, our hero began her exploration of the surrounding creek bottomland. Thick willows by the creek itself and heavy alders on the slopes made for slow going. Circling camp slowly, Liz was able to identify several game trails, none of which was the obvious ingress or egress of the monster Bruin. Tracks were going to be hard to identify as there was just little bare dirt. Instead, the ranger was looking for broken branches and smashed brush where a heavy animal had passed through. Well, after about the second full circle of camp, she was almost 100 yards out and she was still circling. The bear, meanwhile, had been listening the whole time to her movements in the brush. Though he hadn't planned his location as a retreat to ambush, he had simply moved out to await the hunters to leave again when he could return to his easy meal. It wasn't easy finding so much to eat when you're an old bear. He had been the prime breeder for most of his 22 years on the planet. But being pushed out by younger, stronger males, he had wandered to where he was now. There was no resistance to his claim of dominance now. Most meals were easy meals. He just claimed the kill from smaller, weaker animals. However, the vanquished king was used to taking what he wanted, and he would not give ground to one person on foot. He would defend his position to the death. A mile away on the ridgetop above the drainage, the Sasquatch walked into the stream of scent from below. A comfortable feeling from a familiar smell came over the young, big-footed beast. He took another good whiff, then something. His comfort was gone. The unfamiliar smell of an animal. The urine smell and the smell of a scavenger assaulted his senses. His feeling of comfort was gone. In its place, he had gone through curiosity and panic. Those two smells, the patchouli and the scavenger, shouldn't both be so prominent. Now he was in anger mode. His friend, the ranger Liz, whom he considered the only non-threatening human he had ever encountered, was in close proximity to a large predator. He instantly started over the ridge and down the hill, working into the wind. He gathered speed, keeping the strongest scent stream in his face. Unknown to Ranger Liz, she was working her way toward a very dangerous encounter. The bear lay almost hidden in the alder brush just 50 yards away. All of his senses were being focused on the human crossing his back trail, and he was sure from the sounds and the smells that she was small and female. He was becoming emboldened with the thought of a fresh kill. Like so many in his life, he would gorge, then cover her up to hide her carcass from the birds and lay down nearby to sleep, then rise and gorge again. That was his plan. She was now within a few yards and unaware of the danger that was so near. The predator was readying himself for a charge and an attack. Being so focused on Liz, he wasn't aware of the distant crashing of branches and the rapid footfall of the beast moving down the slope towards him. Now Liz was stopped. She had come to what she believed was the trail of a large bear. She was stooped over and studying the ground for a clear track when it happened. The old crusty predator exploded out of his hide where he lay. With a guttural growl, he lunged up and out just 30 feet from where the ranger stood frozen in place. He was sure that he could be on his prey and kill it within a few seconds. What he hadn't figured in was the huge reddish-brown blur moving in from his right side and slightly behind him. The old king had never been taken by surprise. But then, he had never, in his almost quarter of a century on this planet, met a Bigfoot, and never one that was this angry. I would like to say that it was over immediately, but it wasn't. It was one hell of a fight. The bear fighting as they do, with swatting claws and biting and slashing with their teeth, and the Sasquatch with his amazing strength and opposing thumbs was grabbing and pulling the bear to pommel him with his fists and bite deeply into flesh and bone. At one time, the hairy hominid swung a large limb that lay nearby, breaking it over the bear's head, severing an ear and closing an eye. The fight went on for almost 10 minutes. When the attack began, Liz immediately ran back towards her pickup truck, just in time to see the dust in the air from the last of the hunters' caravan as they left the campsite. She hovered near her open door, unable to do anything but listen to the roars from the combatants and see an occasional swaying bush top or a flash of brown and red color through the brush. With adrenaline pumping strong through her veins, Liz listened intently to the battle. With a last loud roar, the fight was over. The only sound now was the creek babbling on the rocky bottom. Nearly 15 minutes had passed when Liz, emboldened by her curiosity and armed with the square point shovel from the bed of her truck, made her way back towards the bear trail and the last sounds of the battle. Moving slowly, on full alert, the sound of her heart beating in her ears, she progressed forward, stopping to look and listen every 2 or 3 steps. Then she saw it. In the brush nearby, concealed by the greenery, was just a little patch of fur. Summoning all the courage she had, she moved towards it. When she was within about 10 feet of what she had seen, she recognized it as a bear, or the remains of an obviously deceased bear. A huge dead bear. Dead in a way that it was disemboweled. And looking closely, she could see that its skull was misshapen and crushed. A foreleg was bent back onto itself. This monarch had met his better. Convinced the giant bear was no more a threat, Liz looked off to her left and heard a little moan, barely audible. She started cautiously towards the sound, not sure what she'd find. Not sure what it was that had hit the grizzly bear and stopped his charge on Liz. She was so intent on getting away and back to her truck that she didn't see much, just kind of a brownish-red blur. Well, her discovery was much the same as with the bear. First a patch of color through the brush, then the closer she got, she saw a form in the crushed alders. Laying in a nearly fetal position was a large, bloody beast. Obviously injured from the fight, his eyes were closed, and little moans came from deep within his chest. Now Liz was more sure of one thing than ever in her life. If there was any way to save this Sasquatch, then she would do it. She owed him that. Well, friends, it's good to be back around the campfire with you tonight. And I'd sure like to see you all again next time. And bring someone new. We'll show them how much fun it is to just sit and stare at the flames. Family and friends surrounding you. Something good to drink. Just telling stories. Yeah, well, until then, folks, be good to yourselves. This is Clay Steele. Good night. Well, friends, welcome to our campfire. Now that it's getting a bit colder, it sure is nice to sit close around this fire ring and share stories. Now, we've already heard some good stories tonight. We're all looking forward to sharing a few more. It looks like some of you are getting ready to make some s'mores, while most of us are just happy with what we have in our mugs. Well, so let me tell you about what's happening with Ranger Liz. You do remember that we left her with a dead grizzly bear and a nearly dead 8-foot Bigfoot beast. Because she felt indebted to this hairy creature for saving her life several times, she now had a chance to repay the debt. Now, this Bigfoot had been injured severely in the fight with that huge old grizzly bear. When that bear ambushed Ranger Liz, her large protector ambushed the Bruin. The battle killed the grizzly bear and damn near killed the beast. And Forest Ranger Liz was not a doctor, but she'd had enough first aid training to recognize that besides the bleeding from all over the prone figure, there could easily be internal injuries as well. It was pretty well known that the swatting pressure from the paws of a mad bear could break bones, and often did. Now, Liz wasn't sure how she was going to approach this. This was a wild Bigfoot creature, and being injured, it might be difficult and dangerous to approach. You know, we all go into a self-defense mode when we're hurt, right? So knowing that we all need water to drink and thinking that he might be immobilized, she ran to her truck and she brought out the 3 water bottles that she found in the cab. Well, she cautiously approached that large, hairy creature. It was frightening to be this close to such an awesome animal. Liz unscrewed the lid off the bottle and reaching out with a shaky hand, she poured just a small trickle of water on the lips of the monster. First, no response. Liz wondered if he had died. Well, glancing toward his chest, she saw a barely perceptible rise and fall motion. So the badly injured animal then he licked his lips, and Park Ranger drizzled more water onto his mouth. And he managed to drink several mouthfuls. So Liz just set the water bottles down, just kind of within his reach, and began an assessment of his injuries. Well, the Bigfoot had blood everywhere on his upper torso, and his fur was matted with branches and leaf litters all tangled up in it. Now, the good thing was that even though he was seeping lots of blood, there didn't appear to be any arterial bleeding. And since she couldn't move him by herself and she wasn't going to bring anyone else in to help, she decided she'd have to care for him right where he lay. Now, this ranger knew that her chance of helping this Bigfoot would be best in the first few hours. and she would have to go and find some medications, and the sooner the better. Well, there wasn't much she could do for her patient without him. So, taking a final look at that large, bloody form of the beast, she turned to leave. By the time she got to her truck, she was shaking like a leaf. The adrenaline was leaving her body slowly. Pretty exciting deal. And as she drove out, she thought of all the violence that had taken place in this creek bottom in the last 24 hours, and she shuddered. Nature sure could change in a split second. As she drove out of that rough, dusty road, she was deep in thought. You know, she did her best thinking behind the wheel. A lot of us do. Well, I do. So she thought it's best to leave the barricades at the head of this road where it intersected with the large, more traveled Forest Service road, and she would hold off on making her report for as long as she could. Liz, she didn't ordinarily turn in a non-actionable report until the end of the week anyway, and by then she'd hoped to have this situation solved, well, one way or another. Her idea was to go down to the riding stables, just down by the visitor center off the paved road. Only about a 30-minute drive once she got out of this creek drainage. And she felt like she was in a hurry. And in fact, she was driving a little fast. But fortunately, there was hardly any traffic this time of year. Only hunters and a few die-hard berry pickers. Pulling into the parking lot at the stables in a cloud of dust, Liz the ranger, the forest ranger with a unique friend in need, shut down the truck and sat and took a deep breath. See, she wanted to be calm. She didn't want to give away her secret mission. So settled, she opened the door and she stepped out. Liz was lucky that day, for the first person she ran into was Lucille Van Durst. She was a fiery, tough, lean, and a little rough around the edges wrangler, and a cowgirl all her life, very knowledgeable about the workings of cattle and horses. That's the way country folk are. Lucille looked up as Liz approached. "Howdy," she said. You see, that's the universal greeting of wranglers and outdoors men and women everywhere. "Hello," said Liz. "How are you today?" "Good and ready," says the wiry cowgirl. "We've packed in 3 base camps this week already, and we'll be at it for the next several days. How are you, ma'am, and what can I do you for, Ranger?" "Well," says Liz, I want to ask a favor of you. You see, I have found a sick animal, and I want to try to help it to recover." The wrangler turned from the pack animal she was rigging, and her eyebrows just barely arched, and said, "Mostly these wild animals won't make it out here with any injuries, what with the predators and all. Sort of nature's way." "Well, I know that," says Liz. "This is a bit of a unique situation, and thought I might be able to make a difference." After a slight pause, and seeing that was all the ranger was going to offer for information, the wrangler turned and walked toward the open door of the tack room. Looking over her shoulder, she motioned for the ranger to follow her. As they got into the cool, shady tack room, the cowgirl turned to her and said, "I can see that this might be a sensitive subject, but because I do care for animals more than people sometimes, what can I do to help? How is this elk or deer or bear hurt?" Liz, for her part, didn't take the bait. She did say that this is a huge animal, and he's all cut up and sore. He fell down a cliff and might not make it anyway. The wrangler then said, "Well, you're gonna need some bute for the pain. But this bute sometimes loops them out. It kind of depends on the animal. And you're gonna need some penicillin for the infection. And I'd recommend some betadine topical ointment to treat any scrapes and wounds. It's an antibacterial." She then asked Liz if she needed to stitch any cuts or wounds, and Liz told her she didn't think so, but she didn't know. She said the patient was immobile. Well, the wrangler reached into the doctoring cabinet and withdrew large syringes of the bute and penicillin, and grabbed a spray bottle of the betadine. Handing them to Liz, she explained the dosages. No more than 2 grams a day of bute for a 1,000-pound horse, and 1 milliliter per hundredweight of penicillin. See, the betadine you use externally as much as you want. Well, the park ranger was relieved to get the meds, and taking them from the wrangler, she asked her, how much do I owe you? I will pay you cash. I don't want this to go on the books. Looking her in the eye, that steely cowgirl said, well, it's on the house. I might need a favor sometime for one of my projects off the books. The ranger stood up straight and, turning to go, said to the wrangler, thank you. I owe you one. As she started the truck to leave, she saw that the packer had returned to work on the pack saddle, as if nothing had really happened here. Perfect, thought Liz. Now I gotta get back if there's any chance of helping this beast. Driving through the barricades and moving them back into place across the road, Liz could see that no one had drove in or out since she did an hour ago. She could tell that by the tracks on the dirt road. Now, relieved of this, since she really didn't want anybody to know just what she was trying to do down in that creek bottom, the ranger parked her truck by the fire ring and she exited slowly. She stood and listened carefully before she moved across the creek toward the area where the big hairy beast had conquered the grizzly bear in battle. As she approached cautiously, she became alarmed that she couldn't see the reddish-brown fur of that Bigfoot where he lay when she left almost 2 hours ago. She could see where he had drug himself some 20 foot farther up into the alders. He lay on his back in a depression of sorts amongst the roots and the limbs of the bushes. Very much a defensible position he was in. Well, Liz crouched over the place where she last seen him and noticed that though there was lots of staining from the blood, there wasn't the pink blobs or large chunks associated with lung or arterial bleeding. Now, she didn't want to surprise the beast, so she thought she'd hum. This morning, leaving the office in her Forest Service pickup, the radio played a Beatles song before she lost reception. And you know how a song sticks in your head? Well, such it was with, I Want to Hold Your Hand. You know that song, everybody does. She slowly approached the creature, crouching and humming. No movement from the beast, but she noticed the water bottles had been bitten through and lay empty where he once was. She sat on her heels and watched the patient closely. His eyes were closed, and his breathing was shallow. She was only a few feet away with a tree trunk laying between them. Her heart was beating wildly as she reached out, holding the syringe full of painkiller. She was now humming the song as loud as she could, as she plunged that needle into his massive thigh. Well, just a slight flinch, nothing more. Emboldened with that, she gave him the penicillin shot a few inches away in the upper thigh. This was going so well that she decided to go back to her truck and bring the bentonine to spray on his wounds. Humming loudly, she returned to his side with the bottle of antiseptic and began to spray his body. With the bottle empty, she set it aside and looked at the hairy face. She moved just a bit closer to confirm the strangest occurrence, that it sounded like he was humming along with her. Not accurately, but a guttural sort of purring sound. Wow, thought Liz. That butte really works. Lucille was right. Well, so she left her ice chest full of water from the creek, as close as she could drag it to his resting spot. She now was willing to leave to go home to gather her thoughts and some food together. She planned to return early in the morning before heading into the office. Maybe with a little food, the beast would heal enough to move under his own power. The ranger wasn't sure how long she could keep this spur road closed before someone, probably a hunter, would drive around the barricades and come on down to the campsite, and then who knows what would happen. So still humming her song, she backtracked to her pickup truck and drove out around the barricades and home. And once home, she was going through her freezer trying to find something to feed the convalescent Bigfoot. Surely some meat, right? Well, all she found was a leg of lamb that someone had given her last year. She brought it out to thaw. That and some yogurt was all she had at home that would possibly work. She didn't want to drive to town to the market. She was exhausted and she was going to get up early, so she had some hummus and chips and she took herself to bed. Strange dreams came and went all night, in which the beast was discovered by hunters and shot dead, or that the beast killed the hunters, and then he would be tracked and hunted. Not very rested, but 2 cups of coffee awake, Liz left home, anxious to get back to the battle scene, so that she would know that her big hairy patient had made it through the night. She was soon to find out that she shouldn't have worried about that 8-foot, almost 500-pound killing machine. She saw the first wolf carcass from the creek as she was crossing, broken and bled out, and its death was obvious from a distance. The second wolf was torn apart and partially eaten. The beast, for his part, had backed himself into the brush in a defensive position and was startled awake by Liz's approach. His eyes were clear, but he grimaced as he stood and began to walk through the brush and slowly back up the slope from where he had come just yesterday. With a last look over his shoulder at Liz, he disappeared into the brush and timber. Stunned to see the giant moving and alive, Liz watched him out of sight, then turned to survey the scene of so much violence over the last couple days, shocked to see that the grizzly bear had been buried deeply in soil and brush and maybe never to be found. The rangers set about to clean the creek bottom of any evidence. She picked up her water bottles and returned the ice chest to the bed of her truck. Liz then drug what was left of the 2 wolves and buried them as deep as she could on the hillside right above the creek bed. Satisfied, she moved back to her truck and headed back up the hill. She planned on leaving this spur road closed for as long as she could, maybe another couple weeks, when the coming rains would wash away all evidence of what had happened here. And as she passed through the barricades, Liz wondered if she would ever see her friend again. Regardless, she thought they were even. Well, there you go. Liz had quite an adventure. Now, for a park ranger, she sure has an exciting life. I don't think that's normal for most rangers. Well, Liz did see that Bigfoot again, but it was some time later, and I can't wait to tell you that story. It's a little late tonight, so friends, make sure to take a little time for yourselves, and we'll see you again. Until then, thanks for coming tonight. This is Clay Steele. Now, good night, all. Well, here we all are again, circled around this campfire, and a nice big one it is tonight. With this full moon in the sky, it's sort of spooky, which is appropriate for the season. Now, many of you took the little ones around to the neighbors for candy and treats. Some of you adults dress up in outlandish outfits to celebrate the end of summer and the Halloween holiday. There are some great costumes out there. Hard to tell the real from the made up. What are you to do when you see a Bigfoot and a dog man standing side by side in conversation? If it weren't for the red Solo cups in their hands, you might want to run. And that's what brings us to tonight's story. Sort of an update on Ranger Liz, our favorite forest ranger that just recently had another encounter with that 8-foot beast, where she helped him to recover from the battle wounds incurred with that big old grizzly bear that intended to make a meal out of Liz. It didn't work out too well for the bear. He's now buried where he died. The enigmatic Sasquatch with a bruised and battered body walked away, as they do, to heal. Well, that was several weeks ago, and the ranger didn't know if she would ever see that animal again. She busied herself with the everyday chores and responsibilities of her job. There was always something to do. The facilities maintenance was an ongoing thing. This year, as always, Liz was to train the new hires in her division. And she was responsible in showing the 3 new ranger trainees all the roads, all the facilities in their district. While it wasn't too complicated, it encompassed a fairly large area. So while spending so much time together, she became familiar with the new hires. There was Darius from just south of Atlanta, and Cody, he was from Twin Falls, Idaho, and Megan that hailed from Manhattan, New York of all places. All three of them were selected from hundreds of applications for the job. They shared a zeal for the out-of-doors. Cody was the only one with any real out-of-doors experience. They all three were eager to fit in, and they were learning. They were learning the Forest Service way of doing things. It made Liz's job easy that they were willing to accept instructions so readily. The three new Rangers had started their careers on the 1st of October and were just getting comfortable with the swing of things. They had met most of the people in and around the Forest Service region. There were the three Rangers, of course, and then the office staff, which were a few, then the stores and the restaurants and the 2 service stations and the corrals and the pack station. There was also a small hotel. And then there was the snow machine and the ATV rental outfit. In the summer, there might be almost 100 people working in that area. Well, now that the season had changed, everyone had cut back to winter staff, and a few services were pulling out till springtime. So every year, the Halloween party was the goodbye to summer and its workers. It was the biggest event of the year. Always the chance to whoop it up and say goodbye to friends. You know, like most of these events, there's always a few that overdo it. They're young and they don't know their limit, or they just overdo it. It's always a good time. It seems that because everyone's in costume, there is no hierarchy. There is no boss and there is no bottom of the totem pole. You're equal for one night. It always starts around dark. They push everyone out and lock the dance hall at around midnight. There's a barbecue grill going with donated meats and veggies, and many people bring side dishes. It's sort of a big picnic. Because officially there is no drinking in the dance hall, all that kind of fun, that takes place in the parking lots and amongst the trees surrounding the hall. And man, oh man, is there some drinking going on. Many a reveler has had their first drink at the annual Halloween bash. And it wasn't unusual to see a staggering partier or a costumed attendee hanging over the bushes vomiting from too much drink. It was a heck of a party every year, and this year was no different. There were almost 400 people at this year's blowout. All the Forest Service staff were there. Many of them brought their spouses or a good friend, and all the packers and wranglers were present as well. But heck, I haven't met a cowboy yet that would miss a party. Well, there were people everywhere. The band played loudly and the liquor flowed, even if it was out in the parking lot. It was just a hoot. Hell, the band played, people danced and ate. There was a lot of laughing, a fair amount of drinking, shoot, just like I told you. The gathering also attracted some undesirables. And so it was that making their way through the crowd and watching for any opportunity to steal were the Jensen brothers and their friend Squid. They were pretty good at being bad. None of them played by the rules we do. They figured if they could take it from you, then you didn't want it bad enough. 3 of the worst, most low-down humans you'd ever meet. And they'd been perfecting their craft their whole lives. Moving through the crowd, they'd steal a drink, or they'd steal dinner tickets. They'd find somebody's coat that was unattended, and they'd just kind of rifle through the pockets. When the 3 of them had gotten their fill of that fine barbecue and that bottle of Jim Beam that Squid had removed from someone's jacket pocket, they started to work their way out to the parking lot. For this was where the richest hunting ground was for a thief. There were ice chests with beer in the back of the trucks. There were tools. There was always a chance of a purse or a wallet with cash and cards, and always the random pistol or rifle behind a seat. Yeah, it was all for their taking. If stupid, trusting people left it and walked away, they must not care about it. They learned some of their best techniques in jail and prison, where all the best criminal minds gathered to share their craft secrets. Oh, it was a good year. Lots of cars and trucks to pick from, and with three of them working together, keeping one as a lookout, they felt pretty comfortable as only a criminal mind can. They were making many trips to their rusty old Impala, and the trunk was filling up pretty fast. The three social degenerates were winding down, and they wanted to go back to the dance hall and see the costume contest. That was always the best part of the evening. There was always some creative genius that had some great idea for a costume, and more to the three criminals' interest, they're often a sexy and revealing costume that the ladies wore, even here in the cold mountain air. This is when the jackets and the coats came off and got laid across the chair backs. It was perfect time for Squid and the brothers, and they planned on scoring some more during that event. They were working their way through the cars and the trucks in the lot, back toward the dance hall. They were only about 150 foot from the building when a large, dark shape stepped out from between two motorhomes and stopped directly in their path. Not sure what to do, Squid stopped short, and the two brothers almost ran into his back. Squid turned around and told the two degenerates, "Move out of my way," as he squeezed between them. His intention was to move over a row or two and head on to the dance hall. But as he rounded the back of a pickup truck and turned toward the party, there that dark shape was again. There were no lights out here in the parking lot, so Squid only saw the dark shape, somewhat backlit by the party lights. It looked huge. Squid thought it had to be a costumed reveler messing with him. So without fear, he made the worst decision in his miserable life. Oh, he'd made many bad decisions, but this was the worst. As the two brothers blindly followed him, they walked straight toward that large dark shadow. Squid thought that the drunk teen in the large ape suit would move out of the way when they got close. He was a bully, and with the two brothers' help, they could beat this kid up for messing with him. They'd ganged up on people before, mostly when they'd been caught breaking into someone's car. And with the three of them coming from three different directions, and not many could win a fight against that gang of criminals. When he got within about arm's distance, he knew something was wrong. This suit was too good, and this thing was huge. What did it for him, though, was the eyes. Even in this poor light, he could see that the eyes were alive and intelligent. And worst of all was the cold, hard malice in the expression on this creature's face. Yeah, he was sure now that their three lives were on the line. Certain that he couldn't outrun whatever this was, he pulled his folding knife and flipped it open. Before Squid could move to use his weapon, a large, meaty hand with long, hairy fingers grabbed and enveloped his hand, knife and all, crushing the bones into pieces of bones. When his hand was released from the grip, Squid fell straight down, passed out from the pain, without a squeak. The brothers turned to run, and before they could take 2 steps, their heads bounced together, making a loud cracking sound, sort of like a coconut sounds when it's thumped. The party went on without him. The nominations were being placed for the costume contest finals. See, partiers they'd fill out a card with their choice of the best costume, and when the cards were counted and tallied up, the 12 finalists are set. Then the finalists are rounded up and they parade around on stage for the loudest approval by applause. The winner gets $250. The second place was $100. The 3 criminals, however, never got to cast a vote. They were found trussed up tightly, their hands tied back to their feet, hog-tied, I believe. They were laid out on the ground and surrounded by the items they had stolen from the partygoers. Their Impala, strangely enough, never ran again. It wasn't worth fixing with all the damage it had incurred there in the lot. Nobody could figure out who had beat that car so badly, but then not much effort was spent trying to solve that mystery. Squid and the 2 brothers claimed it was an escaped lunatic in an ape-man costume that did that to him. But with the evidence of their crimes and their criminal records, nobody believed them, and they were convicted. All three went back to prison for a while. What sort of went unnoticed is there were 25 preliminary votes for a life-size Bigfoot to be placed in the final round of the costume contest. But that partier couldn't be found, so the $250 went to a couple in a horse costume. It's a shame because the people that saw it said that Bigfoot costume was very realistic. Well, that'll show you folks, sometimes good does prevail over evil. Not often enough for me, but it feels good when it does. Now, I'm glad I could tell you this story, and I'm sure we'll come up with another. We always do. So the next time we get together and get around this campfire, we'll laugh, we'll tell some stories, we'll have some good times, we'll have a little something in the mug. And until then, well, this is Clay Steele, and I'll see you next time. Well, hello all. These shorter days of winter have us gathering around this campfire earlier in the evening, and the warmth from the burning wood feels real good. It's colder here, and it's in the 20s most nights. Makes you glad to have that mug of something to warm your insides, and has you looking for someone to snuggle close to for warmth on the outside. Companionship is important in life, and even those of us that spend a lot of time alone need to be around others occasionally. We are social animals, as are most of God's creatures. And that's why I want to talk about our friend Liz the Ranger. She's busied herself with the training program for the new hirees, remember that? She spends most hours at work with those 3 new Rangers. And the familiarity that comes with so much close contact has them all trading stories and laughing with one another. And that's companionship. Kind of like we do here around the campfire. Now, most days would find Liz briefing the 3 in the coffee room, the Forest Service office. She'd brief them on the day's work plans. Then the group of new hires would head out of the parking lot and get into their work truck or trucks if they'd split and drive onto the job site. Liz then had the time to make her rounds of the facilities before joining the others, wherever they were working. It worked out well for all. Now, this particular day, they've had a project going on. The Rangers have been on the site of a new bathroom and visitor kiosk, also included a paved parking lot. Though these 3 new Rangers and Liz, they were all here when any real work was going on, they were more in a supervisory and observational role. The work was being performed by subcontractors that were specialists in the trades working through a federal government-hired general contractor. So in this way, the team of Rangers were learning quite a lot. And Liz had just checked in with the 3, then headed out to do some routine inspections. And she was out to check a few of the more remote facilities today. Since there was only to be concrete block work done today, she had the freedom to get away from the job and left the trainees to observe the work. Liz decided to head out to inspect that region that had burned earlier in the summer. You remember we talked about that. Now, the Ranger parked in the same lot near the bathroom at the trailhead where she slipped and she fell and became unconscious, only to wake up in that cave up on the hill after being rescued by what she believed was a friendly Bigfoot. Though that was only a few months back, it was still a fresh memory and left many questions still unanswered. She shouldered her day pack, attached her bear spray and flashlight to her belt. She was feeling a little better prepared than usual. She even packed a pretty good lunch today. One of her new trainees, Cody, you remember him, he'd given her some elk summer sausage that he'd made. And oh boy, was it tasty. Being a hunter, he usually brought some tasty treats to share with his coworkers. Ranger Liz didn't really eat a lot of meat. It wasn't that she didn't like it, it was just that she preferred natural game. And she didn't hunt, so when the opportunity presented itself, she absolutely enjoyed it. So she started out from the parking lot along the same path that led her to the caves up on the ridge top a mile or so away. We talked about that as well. You know, that same trail that she'd used like 3 times now. So she hiked up to the ridge to try to find some answers in the cave before. If we remember, it was a nice hike through the tall trees. She was stepping well, and it felt good to be in the woods, just moving slowly and enjoying the hike. The ranger reached the ridge line, and the view was just spectacular. Liz could see across that large canyon to the mountainside that had burned in the summer fire. What a sight. Black and gray. Though there would be some green grasses by next summer, it just looked like a wasteland today. Well, our ranger Liz, she worked her way along the bouldery ridge until she found herself the large outcropping of rocks where the cave she remembered was. Now, this is where she'd woken up after falling and hitting her head, hard enough to go unconscious. Although it had been a couple months, the memories of that event hadn't fully returned. You see, she had a minor concussion, and that had fogged her thoughts for quite some time. I believe some of us carry those injuries for the rest of our lives. Our memories and our thought processes are sometimes forever altered. Does anyone have any thoughts on that? I know I do. I got my head conked pretty good not too many years ago, and boy, it changed me a bit. Kind of a strange deal. In Liz's case, she had found that she became more introspective, seemingly more aware of the things and the people she crossed paths with. See, that was maybe why Liz valued these moments where she could be alone. Alone in the woods even more. She cautiously approached the cave, not knowing what she expected to find, and, mildly disappointed when she found it empty, just as she had last seen it. She sat down on a flat rock in the cave and swung the day pack from her shoulders, figuring this would be a good time to have a drink of water and a snack. With a handful of trail mix and a cup of water, she rested. Not sure how long it had been, she realized that she'd been daydreaming for quite a while. Since she wanted to hike farther out the ridge in order to get a better view of the burn area, she loaded up her pack and she set out. As the ranger got further down the ridge, the foliage changed. The trees got smaller and bushier, and the brush got a lot thicker and harder. It was hardier brush. There were times that she was forced to backtrack to find a way through the thick brush. She wasn't on any main trail. She was just following a series of small game paths, just sort of whatever the least resistance was between the bushes. The going was so slow now, and the brush was so thick that the ranger wasn't really making any real headway. She seemed to be working her way around the perimeter of this large depression that she could see off to the side. It looked to be about 150 yards across, covered in thick brush, about 10 foot tall, and boulder piles everywhere. There was a spring sprouting from a rock outcropping where the water ran down along the ground for about 100 foot, forming small pools and feeding a little meadow. Strangely, the water seemed to disappear. The ranger was curious and followed the stream to a rock pile. The water ran into the ground through what looked to be a cave mouth. Now, this wasn't really unusual, as Liz knew that there were many underground streams and rivers in these mountains. She circled the rock pile and she came to a halt. Just in front of her, no more than 20 feet, was a well-used trail that ran right into the earth between two of the boulders. Our ranger Liz felt fear. The hair on the back of her neck was standing up and her eyes were darting around. Not sure why, but she was sure that she wanted out of there. Back up a few paces and moving away, as well as she could move in that thick brush, Surrounding the little oasis, she struggled with her pack, hanging up on every bush, making her progress slow and noisy. After 20 minutes of pushing through the brush and the trees were taller, and because less sun reached the forest floor because of the trees, there was less brush to wade through. She stopped and took her pack off, setting it on a low rock. She plopped down next to it. She closed her eyes, drawing a huge breath and holding it in while silently counting to 10, releasing the air from her lungs. She opened her eyes and looked fully around, relieved that she was still alone. Then she began to ponder what she'd seen. Though it was her district, she'd never been on that particular slope. The main trail was below that clearing by at least a half a mile, and the ridge tailed out above about a quarter mile. And because of the thick brush, there was no reason to traverse that slope. There was no known water source, except for what she found, so the hunters would have no thought as to what there'd be any game there. There was no good reason to be there. The water that came to the surface then disappeared into the cave complex made that really an exceptional spot. Whatever it was that used that trail and lived in that cave was probably never bothered by people. Well, Liz was thinking this would be a good experience for her 3 new trainees. With the 4 of them, they could safely explore the clearing and cave complex. It'd be a good team-building experience. She found the trail down the hill and walked the mile back to the parking lot. And driving out of the lot and down the hill, she vowed to make it happen the first chance possible. And so it was early the next week. The job was on hold, waiting for the roofing contractor to get some materials that he needed to roof the bathroom and the kiosk. Some sort of back order at the factory. You know how it is. Well, Ranger Liz saw this as the perfect opportunity for the 4 of them to go on a hike and do a little exploring. The team split up to perform facility inspections and met up in the parking lot at the trailhead by 10 in the morning. As per requirements, Liz held a quick safety meeting. They call them tailgate safety meetings. They all checked their equipment. There's bear spray, whistle, a belt knife or a folding knife, and they all carried their government-issued handheld radios. Besides that, all 4 had day packs with first aid equipment, lunch, and other essentials. Ranger Liz led them out away from the facility over the unmarked path that she had been on several times now. They would head to the cave where Liz lay after being rescued. Then they'd work their way down the ridge through the thick brush and hopefully be able to find that little clearing with the spring creek and the cave. So they walked for about an hour before coming to the ridge line. They stopped for water and decided to eat lunch. They sat around on the rocks and enjoyed the view across the drainage. Darius was silent as he ate his lunch, just staring at the vista that was the canyon and the 2 mountains beyond. He smiled at the others and said, "This sure ain't like Atlanta." When they had finished and shouldered their packs, they started out again, following Liz single file down the ridgeline. They stopped and caught their breath many times as they worked their way down that slope, as the brush got thicker and thicker, until their pace was just nearly a crawl. The 3 new rangers were all wondering what their boss had gotten them into and doubting it could be worth it, when just as Liz remembered, they broke through the outer ring of thick brush and stepped into a clearing with low brush and grasses. All 3, and even Ranger Liz, were amazed at the beauty of this little oasis on the rough, dry hillside. None of them spoke as they all took in the splendor. They let their eyes travel over the grasses fed by the spring water, then to the little flooded creek that ran through a rocky flat and disappeared into a boulder pile halfway across the clearing. It reminded Cody of the football stadium at the high school in Twin Falls where he played 4 years varsity. This little natural bowl on the side of this mountain could fit the whole stadium, bleachers and all. They began to explore. Megan squatted down next to the creek and studied the water. She identified several insect species that were known to be food for the mountain brook trout found in this area. Though she didn't see any fish, she did believe that there could be some if they did a little more searching. The team worked their way up to the boulder pile, and then they worked their way around it, of course, and eventually they came to the opening between the boulders, and they were all curious as to the size and extent of the cave. The Rangers had a little conference and agreed to go in single file. It would be Liz, followed by Cody, then Darius would be near the mouth, and Megan would remain outside as sort of a safety officer. They had no idea how far back the cave went. They weren't really prepared to do any rappelling or going through any really tight passages. Mostly just curious. They figured to get a basic look, and if it looked interesting, they'd come back with the proper gear for safe exploration. So Liz and Cody set their packs down, got out their flashlights, and they entered the cave mouth. Large enough to stand in, the entrance worked around a boulder to the right and began to descend at a fairly steep angle. The two Rangers worked their way twisting and descending for a good 75 foot down into the earth. The creek from the clearing joined the passage and created a moist, cool atmosphere, running off to the side and just in sight of the explorers. As the cave passage turned back to the left into a fairly large chamber, maybe as big as your living room, with a ceiling that started just over their heads and just soared to over 25 foot or so across the room. As they panned their lights around the cave chamber, they could see that the floor dropped away 10 feet in front of the two. Then at the far edge of the room, there was a ledge and what looked like maybe would have been an opening beyond that. Well, Liz turned and talked with Cody, and they agreed that if they were to go any farther into this cave, that they would need some serious safety equipment. So, making their way back out, they told the other two Rangers what they'd seen. And Cody led them both down one at a time to give them a look at the beauty of that cavern. As they repacked their gear and readied themselves for the hike out through the tough brush, they discussed and all agreed that they were interested in exploring that cavern more closely, but were all thinking that some serious planning would take place first. You see, this cave looked to have lateral passages and could have hidden caverns. So satisfied that they had a good experience, plenty of exercise, they worked their way back through the brush and toward the Forest Service pickups in the lot. The three trainees laughed about how their boss's little team-building exercise had left them all sore and scratched up from the extreme hike and the tough brush busting they'd done. Liz, however, she hadn't said much as they walked out. She was preoccupied. She's trying to digest the implications of what she'd found in the cave on a rock ledge. So Cody hadn't seen it as he was leading the way back to the surface. She wasn't sure she could share this information yet. But one thing that she was sure of, there was no mistaking the long-sleeve Reggae Fest t-shirt that she lost to that hairy beast. And folks, I was talking about how important companionship is. You can see that something like spelunking is not to be attempted without a companion. For safety reasons, of course. And campfires, they just warm your soul when you get to share them with others. So enjoy each other's company, folks. You never know when your last campfire will be. Till next time, this is Clay Steele. Good night, all. Well, hello, friends. Come on over. If one of you could grab a couple pieces of that firewood as you go by, we can build this fire up a bit. It's cold tonight. We can use all the heat we can muster out of this fire pit. Fill your mug, find a good place to sit. Sit by a friend, make a new friend. We'll tell some stories and visit till we've all had enough. Now, last I told you, our friend Liz made a puzzling discovery while she and 3 new ranger trainees were exploring the cave she found on the side of a brushy mountain. At home that night, she got a closer look at the t-shirt she found on the ledge in the cave. Well, as she laid it flat on the kitchen table, she could see that it was from the Reggae Fest concert that she attended back in college. It was a size small and had long sleeves. As she turned it over, and on the back was a small dime-sized tear that she remembered getting when she snagged it on a door frame a couple years back. Liz was convinced completely that it was the shirt that the long, hairy hominid had taken from her when she was swimming in the lake while on that pack trip 2 months ago. She last saw it when he turned and walked off into the trees, holding it in his hand. She remembered being a little miffed that he'd carried it off. She was attached to that shirt as a memory of her youth and experiences shared. Now, Liz had always taken good care of the garment, and in fact, from what she could tell by first appraisal, it still looked to be in good shape. Sure, it could use a good cleaning, and that's what it got that night. The ranger went to sleep with an unsettled mind. She just didn't sleep well. She had a few unsettling dreams. You may have those. They aren't real specific, but the theme is the same. It feels like your subconscious mind is scolding you, trying to change your opinion. Now, maybe it's our brain searching out a solution. Whatever the reason, she woke up feeling worn out. This would be a rough day at work. She made herself a strong cup of coffee and sipped it as she packed herself a lunch. Some carrot sticks, an apple, a brown muffin, some hummus, some good corn chips. Now, she might not even have an appetite today, she thought. By the time she got into her office, everyone else was there, well, except for Darius, one of her trainees. He had called into the message center with a fever and was staying home today. It would be okay. Her other 2 trainees, Cody and Megan, could easily oversee the construction project and the facilities inspections that was part of their responsibilities. Now, Liz wanted to be alone today. She was deep in thought and just wanted to drive around her district. She finished her paperwork and assigned her trainees their jobs, and she left the office. Ranger Liz drove the 4 corners of her district and checked out a few facilities and campgrounds she hadn't seen since the end of summer. Everything looked to be in pretty good shape and ready for what the winter would bring. So it was that she found herself in the parking lot at the trailhead where just last week she and her ranger trainees had started out on a day hike that led them to a natural bowl on a brushy mountainside. The same bowl that Liz had stumbled upon recently while exploring, and in a cave within that bowl, while the 4 of them explored, Liz found her t-shirt that had been taken by the Bigfoot in the fall. When he walked away from her carrying her stolen shirt, she thought she'd never see it again. Her curiosity was running full on. This is when she usually became careless. And friends, Ranger Liz was not going to disappoint. She shouldered her day pack, passed the bathrooms, and joined the trail. She knew the way there. She'd been there twice before. And not sure what she'd find, Liz somehow was strangely drawn toward the clearing in the forest and the cave. Maybe she would gain some clarity about the strange events of the last year. It isn't normal to have so much interaction with a Sasquatch. Most people never see any signs their whole life. The ranger walked for a good, 45 minutes and knew she was getting close. As the brush grew more dense and the trees became shorter, her pace slowed. Then, just as before, Liz broke through into the large clearing she was becoming familiar with. Stopping to rest, catch her breath, she sipped some water and She just took in the view. The ranger was taken by the beauty of this little clearing. Well, barely 150 by 75 yards, with a few big rock piles and a creek that meandered through a small green meadow, and then it disappeared into a large rock pile near the center of the bowl. It was nearly a perfect little spot. She had found it by accident and was pretty sure no one else knew it was here. That is, except for her 3 trainees. But she had made them promise to keep it a secret. Our friend Liz decided she needed another look in the cave. They had left it largely unexplored. They agreed to come back with the proper gear so they could get back into the side rooms and across the drop-off where she and Cody had turned around the first time that they'd entered the cave. But heck, here she was alone and with no ropes or gear except a flashlight. What could go wrong? Telling herself that she would take no real risks, just explore the first 50 foot or so, Ranger Liz entered the cave. Using her flashlight, she took her time and looked into all the little side tunnels and explored away every little nook. She spent 45 minutes in the cave and had explored all the way to as deep as she had been before. A chasm with a creek in it, and a ledge across the chasm with what looked like a passage beyond. Well, unable to jump across the chasm and wisely deciding not to try, she sat and she munched on a granola bar. Liz had pulled that and a large red apple from her pack, set them on the rock. Being deep in thought as she got up to exit the cave, she forgot about the apple, and it sat there on the rock where she had eaten her snack. She went out through the clearing and struggled her way through the brush. After a while, she came to the more open forest with larger trees. She sat down on a large rock to catch her breath. As she sipped her water, Liz took in the grandeur of the open forest floor. It was sort of cathedral-like with the tall tree trunks and the canopy above. She turned her head to take in the view behind as well and darn near dropped her water bottle. For there, 100 foot away, standing motionless, was the beast, all 8 foot of him, looking intently at the ranger, then slowly turning his head to his right. Liz followed his line of sight and was stunned by what she saw. It was another hairy beast, but somewhat smaller, around 6.5 to 7 foot tall, also standing silently, just watching the ranger. Now, as Liz watched them in awe, the larger Bigfoot walked to the smaller one and nuzzled the animal. Liz realized then what she was seeing. This was a female. And as the female moved about, not only was she obviously female, but appeared pregnant. Very pregnant. Liz was floored. So much to process here. The 2 creatures were obviously affectionate towards one another. And was her friend, the beast she had known and had saved her life twice, was he introducing Ranger Liz to his mate? Was this friendly beast about to be a dad? Wow, was all Liz could think. Just wow. Then, as the 2 creatures turned to walk away, Liz noticed the smaller of the 2 was carrying an apple, a large red apple. Our friend Liz watched until she could no longer see them, then slowly shouldered her pack and started off in the other direction, towards the parking lot, amazed at what she had seen. Then a thought crossed her mind, and she removed her day pack and opened it up, rifling through her belongings. She remembered that she had taken the apple from her day pack and set it on a rock in the cave. Now, if that was her apple, how did the beast get that apple? And how did they get to where she was sitting? Liz never saw a trail through the thick brush, and she didn't hear any big animals moving through the dense thicket. Was there another way into the clearing? Certainly the 2 beasts would have trouble running with one so obviously pregnant. Could the cave have another entrance outside of the line of brush? She wondered aloud as she made it back to her truck. What was it all about? After checking in with the trainees at the job site, she headed home. And finally, she had a good night's sleep. Well, friends, that's the latest about Liz. And I'm glad y'all were here and glad we could share that story. Now, what I want to do is I want to see y'all again. Pretty soon, maybe one or two of you'll have a story you'll want to share. It sure is fun. And remember, friends, we're all we got, so we got to take care of us. Look after one another. Until I talk to y'all again, this is Clay Steele. Good night. Well, here we are again. It's getting real close to Christmas, and I'm excited to see the kids' reactions to their gifts. But more importantly, the most enjoyment I get is from seeing family and friends that I don't see much during the rest of the year. They have moved away for some reason or another and only come back home this time of year. We catch up on the doings of each other and we speak of memories. That helps to get me in the mood to celebrate the real reason for Christmas. So I am glad to see many of you that I haven't seen in a while. We have a big group around the fire tonight, so grab a big mug of something good to drink and visit with someone you haven't seen in a while. Let's catch up. While you're enjoying the camaraderie, I'll tell you what's been happening with Forest Ranger Liz. After the amazing sight of that pair of Bigfoot beasts, obviously expecting a child soon, she was determined to show her friendship by giving a gift to honor the birth of their baby. Well, that's what we humans do. So Ranger Liz found a nice woven basket, almost 2 foot across, at least a foot deep. She bought a bag of Florida oranges at the market and picked as many fine red apples from her neighbor's tree. That is where she got the apple that she lost in the cave, so she was sure that the creatures liked them. Then she dried out a nice bunch of beef slices from a top round roast for jerky. Now Liz also added to the basket a blanket that she had made in high school as a project for her home economics course. Now, it wasn't more than 4 foot square, but it was nice and thick with earthy tones. And looking around the kitchen, she saw the candy that a cousin in California had sent her during the fall. It was a bag of Dewar's peanut butter chews from a 100-plus-year-old candy store, and man, are they good. This Liz thought was in case they had a sweet tooth, as most critters do. Now she assembled all these things into the basket and put it in the front seat of her Forest Service pickup in the driveway. First thing in the morning after coffee in the office, she drove out to the parking lot where she left her truck and put the gifts in her pack and tied the basket on the cargo straps, and off she went. Her plan was to try to find a back way into the cave system if there was one. She knew that a trail or any depression in the forest floor was something only visible with low-angle light. So early in the morning or last light in the evening will sometimes cast shadow patterns that will reveal a path that normally can't be identified. The ranger headed towards the place where she had last seen that pair of squatch just a few days ago. The sun was still low when she got to the rock pile she had been sitting on when she saw the hairy couple. Well, she walked slowly around, watching ahead of her for any anomalies in the forest floor. A half hour of ever-widening circles before something caught her eye. The pine needles looked to be scuffed and beaten down a bit under a pine with low branches. She walked past the tree, and she noticed that the dew had disappeared from what looked like a kind of a general line on the ground that ran away from where she was standing. Now it looked like it could be a trail. Well, she walked off to one side of it and followed it for about 100 yards where it disappeared and reappeared, and it was kind of hard to pick out. And then it just disappeared. Now the light had changed as the sun angle was higher now. Not giving up, Ranger Liz gave a good look around. Seeing nothing out of ordinary, she continued on in line with and away from what she thought was the trail that she was following, toward a large rock outcropping where the forest floor began to angle up and got much steeper beyond the rocks. Curious now, she approached the rocky slope. She climbed around the big angular rocks until she found herself facing a void in front of her between two rock shoulders and partially blocked from the front by a large fractured slab of stone that had slid from above. From the void, cool air was gently blowing by our friend of Bigfoot. It had an earthy smell, as you would expect, coming out of a cave, but something else as well, a musky, somewhat pungent scent. Not quite sure what it was. She stepped past the slide and into the dark void. Stopping there, half in the light and half in the dark, she prepared herself to enter the cave. She replaced her sunglasses with clear lenses, got out her flashlight and her bear spray for good measure, took a swig of water, then went forward slowly. Not sure this was the same cave system that she found a few months ago, though the two entrances couldn't be more than a quarter to a half mile apart. And there was the air blowing past. The ranger knew that the moving air proved that there was another outlet somewhere. There were many side caves and little rooms. Ranger Liz moved slowly, exploring as she went. More than an hour into it since she entered the cave, Liz still hadn't seen anything out of the ordinary. It was then that she bent to stoop through a tight spot, and she stepped into a large room. She wasn't exactly sure which direction she'd been moving, but she always felt that she had been descending somewhat. This room, maybe a cavern would be a better description. It was maybe 75 feet to the far side, and on that far side there was a small stream of water squirting out of the wall and pulling up before running down into the floor and disappearing again. The ceiling was tall. It was 30 or more feet high. And the sound of the water was echoing all around and sounded peaceful to the ranger. Now the musty smell was strong here in this part of the cave. Liz, she looked up to what looked like a large flat ledge above the pool of water. It was there that the ranger found what she was looking for. For hanging over the edge of the shelf was what looked like a woven basket material. Liz figured it to be bedding material. Though, 15 foot above her, she figured she'd gone far enough. She hadn't discovered the other entrance into the cave, but decided that this was far enough. If this was the Bigfoot's lair, as she thought it was, she was lucky she hadn't ran into it, and if they were nearby, she didn't want to have them feel threatened. Liz, the forest ranger, she untied the basket from her pack and set it down by her feet. She filled it with the jerky, the fruit, and the candy, placing the blanket on top. She then turned. She retraced her path back to the surface. It didn't take near as long going back, as she didn't have to stop and explore all the side tunnels. Still early as she started back to the parking lot, it was only around 10 a.m. So she made her way back to the office and finished up on the office work and had a pretty uneventful day, went on home, and that's sort of the way the rest of the week worked out. Just kind of went without incident. They got a lot done. A lot of the subcontractors that were working on the new installations were going home for the holidays, so there wasn't a lot going on. And she found herself looking forward to the office Christmas party. Now, there was only going to be about 30 people there, and they had rented out the back room at Rosie's, the Mexican restaurant down by the service station and near the hotel, but the hotel was closed for the winter. It was always a good time. Since there was no official New Year's Eve party thrown for the Forest Service staff, this Christmas party served as the year-end hurrah. There was always a spirited gift exchange, the white elephant variety, maybe you've seen that, where gifts could be swapped or stolen by each guest as they opened their presents one at a time. usually begun after dinner and well into the evening. Most guests had already consumed a drink or two. Lots of fun, and usually providing good stories that would circulate the office for a while. Yeah, she was looking forward to that. And while she was in town shopping for supplies, Liz found a scarf and a hat that had been knitted by a local artisan that would make the perfect gift for the office party exchange. She kept herself so busy all week that she didn't really have time to wonder how her friend the Bigfoot was doing. When she had more time after Christmas, Liz decided she would make a run out toward the caves to satisfy her curiosity. Well, we're kind of caught up with Liz here for a while, and I hope you all have to get a chance to see friends and family. And if you're spending Christmas alone this year, use the time to reflect. Remember the real reason for this holiday. I'll talk to you all more around Christmas. So until then, let the spirit of the season in. This is Clay Steele. Good night. Well, look at y'all. Don't mind the weather. A little bit of snow's okay. It seems appropriate for the season. Yes, Christmas is here. I see some of you have brought family or friends with you tonight. I was expecting a big group, so me and some of the boys built a bigger fire pit. And it looks like we'll be having a bonfire when this wood all catches. That's great, because I figure we'll be here for a while. We're going to tell some stories, and before evening's up, we'll all be singing Christmas carols. It's what we do this time of year. So get your mug filled up with some holiday cheer, and let's tell some stories. You know where we left Forest Ranger Liz? She'd left a gift basket full of thoughtful goodies in that cave where she thought the Bigfoot couple was living. In a sort of a universal understanding, the gifts of jerky, fruit, and candy would make it easier on the couple and was a way of celebrating the birth of their child. She hadn't given it much thought for the last week or so. She'd been pretty busy with the year-end business and preparation for the annual Christmas party. Liz helped to decorate the banquet room at Rosie's Mexican restaurant Saturday morning, then went home to get dressed for the party. By the time that Ranger Liz pulled up to Rosie's in her Subaru, there were already several people there. Parties were always like that. Some people just can't wait to get started. Several of the office staff were there with their significant others, and the laughter was rolling out of the doorway to the back room. Dressed in worn clothing and a few funny-looking sweaters, the revelers were already off to a pretty good start. The two front office girls were drinking wine. The husband of the copy room woman was already looking a little green and sitting at a table with a fuzzy smile. He either started partying in the parking lot or was a sprinter. Could be either, Liz thought, as she worked her way through the growing crowd towards the unofficial coat room. It was just a table set up behind the bar in the corner of the room. She left her jacket on the table and turned to find two of her trainees, Megan and Cody, just making it through the throng of partiers. They said their hellos and all turned toward the bar. It seemed like the thing to do, after all. Cody ordered and paid for their drinks. A glass of Pendleton whiskey for himself, a Heineken for Liz, while little Megan surprised them both by ordering a Girl Scout cookie cocktail. It's just a really sweet concoction of Kahlua, Baileys, and peppermint schnapps. Better keep an eye on her, thought Liz to herself. Looks like an inexperienced drinker. She'll either be sick or drunk, or both, if she keeps that up. Cody, handing her drink to her, laughed and said, "God, the way you put those down, they could be called a forest ranger." Liz, looking at them both, said, "Wow, how do you know that?" Cody, looking down at his hand-tooled boots, explained that he'd run into Megan at the Old Corral, a bar in town, when Megan was entertaining a few of her out-of-town sorority sisters earlier in the fall. She must have put away 4 or 5 of them and never faltered, he declared. She smiled, taking a sip, and said, "My superpower." Liz laughed. Then behind her boss appeared, touching her elbow. Liz turned and said hello to him and gave his wife a nice hug. The social hour went on for a bit longer than an hour, and everyone was ready when their meal was served. It was family style, where the serving plates were at the long tables and everyone passed them about. The carnitas, the chili rellenos, the excellent salads, and even a few dishes that were not on the normal restaurant menu. There was a dish named after the cook, a true master. The owner called the frickin' Omar. They were tacos with equal amounts of chopped steak and shrimp covered in an excellent and quite hot green chili sauce. As good a meal as could be had. A couple more beers, then at some point Cody brought back 2 glasses of Pendleton from the bar. Liz asked for a sip and was now on her second glass. Oh boy. Then the White Elephant gift exchange brought out the laughter in everyone. The scarf and hat that Liz gifted was stolen in the exchange twice, therefore staying where it was, proudly on the head and around the neck of the mechanic's wife. Liz somehow ended up with a fruitcake in a tin, which brought out even more laughter from the room. What a party. Too soon the night was over. Liz, realizing that she shouldn't drive, willingly accepted a ride home from Darius. He was completely sober, as he just didn't drink alcohol. He never did. He just didn't like it. And if you were to see him during the party, he was laughing just as loud as everyone. Just one of those happy souls. Well, Ranger Liz left her Subaru there in the lot, and Rosie told her that that was just fine. Saying their goodbyes to the dwindling crowd and thanking the restaurant staff, Darius and Liz got into his Dodge Charger and started out the lot and down the winding road to town and the foot of the mountain. Liz found some Christmas music on the radio and sang along for the 30-minute drive, Darius laughing and trying to keep up with this the whole time. It was just past 10:30 when they pulled into the driveway to Liz's small, humble home. Darius walked with Ranger Liz up the walkway to the front door. Then he handed her the fruitcake tin with a smile. As he was turning to leave, Liz surprised them both by standing on her toes and kissing her trainee, Darius. He, with a look of shock, stood still for a few seconds, then a big smile broke out on his face, and he told Liz, "Good night, and I'll see you after Christmas." Within a few minutes, the Charger was heading home, and Liz was inside her house behind her locked door and wobbly heading towards her bedroom. Humming the whole time, "I Want to Hold Your Hand" by the Beatles. Now where did that come from, wondered Liz as she drifted off to sleep, fully clothed and on top of her covers. Sunday morning was hard on a few of the partygoers. Liz was one of them. She hadn't had a hangover in more than a couple years, and this one was making up for it. She drank 2 cups of coffee, made a scrambled egg and some toast, but she couldn't eat because she felt a little sick still. She remembered kissing Darius at the door last night and hoped she wouldn't have to explain to him that it was only just because she was drunk. He probably already knew that. Whew, these Christmas parties. She forced herself to get showered and dressed and began to feel a little more human. It was almost 10 o'clock when she called her neighbor Leslie and offered to buy her lunch for a ride to Rosie's to get the Subaru. And 15 minutes later, they were on the road and headed up the hill. It was a beautiful day for a drive, and there were a few Sunday drivers out already. As they pulled into Rosie's lot, Ranger Liz recognized at least a few other cars that were left behind the night before. Yep, another blowout Christmas party at Rosie's. Liz transferred her things to her car, then they went inside to have some lunch. As they were seated, Chef Omar smiled knowingly from the kitchen, and Liz gave kind of a little wave with an embarrassed smile on her lips. Soon after a few bites from her green salad with El Pastor, Liz felt almost fully restored, though she knew she wouldn't crave a drink for quite a while. She thanked Leslie and got into the driver's side of her Subaru. As she let her little 4-cylinder warm up, she allowed her mind to wander to the gift basket and her large, friendly Bigfoot with his expectant bride. She looked out the window and saw big puffy clouds where the direct sunlight would be blocked and the sun would find its way through the holes in the cloud cover. It's just a beautiful day. The ranger didn't want to go home. A little drive is what she needed, Liz thought. Ranger Liz pulled out of the parking lot and headed up the hill. She drove for about 20 minutes or so and found herself in that familiar parking lot for the trailhead that led to the caves. Well, she put her jacket on and shouldered her day pack. Then she began the hike that she had made several times before. A nice, gradual, upward slope through the large, tall trees. It was easy walking with the spongy layers of brown pine needles covering the forest floor. She had been hiking for about 45 minutes when she found that she was approaching the cave mouth in that rock outcropping. The ranger stopped about 100 feet short and sat on a rock to take a break to get some water and just enjoy the scenery. It really was a beautiful day to be on a hike in these woods. The sun was flitting about actively, where she would be in the shade for a while, then bright sunlight for a few minutes. Well, Liz was just standing up to go. She decided she would not go into the cave today, when from around the cave mouth in the rocks appeared the 8-foot beast that Liz had become acquainted with over the last 2 years. He stepped out into the open and looked back from where he had just came. And there, following almost in his footsteps, was the smaller of the two Squatches. The same one she had seen before that was so obviously pregnant. And as the female came abreast of her friend, the Bigfoot, Liz's eyes softened and a feeling of love and amazement overcame her. For this creature was cradling a baby in a blanket. The blanket Liz had made in high school and left in the cave just last week. Liz couldn't see much of the baby. His little face was pink and a few strands of reddish hair stuck up from his head. The largest beast turned his gaze away from Liz and looked down at the baby, then to the face of his mate, and a proud smile came to his lips as he looked up into the trees, just as a single ray of sunlight shone through the canopy and settled on the three of God's creatures. The beast opened his mouth and howled like nothing Ranger Liz had ever heard before. Liz turned and rapidly walked away and back towards her Subaru. That night at home, Liz prayed for all of humanity, all of God's creatures. Well, I think the caroling is going to start soon, and I'm going to go refill my mug, maybe get some of that hot chocolate. So I'm glad you made it tonight. Sorry you're leaving so soon. As you leave, remember we're all on this planet together. Be kind as you can. You don't know what someone else is going through. Remember that Christmas is truly about the birth of our Savior. Well, I look forward to our next get-together. Until then, this is Clay Steele. Merry Christmas. Well, hello all. These shorter days of winter have us gathering around this campfire earlier in the evening, and the warmth from the burning wood feels real good. It's colder here, and it's in the 20s most nights. Makes you glad to have that mug of something to warm your insides, and has you looking for someone to snuggle close to for warmth on the outside. Companionship is important in life, and even those of us that spend a lot of time alone need to be around others occasionally. We are social animals, as are most of God's creatures. And that's why I want to talk about our friend Liz the Ranger. She's busied herself with the training program for the new hirees, remember that? She spends most hours at work with those 3 new Rangers. And the familiarity that comes with so much close contact has them all trading stories and laughing with one another. And that's companionship. Kind of like we do here around the campfire. Now, most days would find Liz briefing the 3 in the coffee room, the Forest Service office. She'd brief them on the day's work plans. Then the group of new hires would head out of the parking lot and get into their work truck or trucks if they'd split and drive onto the job site. Liz then had the time to make her rounds of the facilities before joining the others, wherever they were working. It worked out well for all. Now, this particular day, they've had a project going on. The Rangers have been on the site of a new bathroom and visitor kiosk, also included a paved parking lot. Though these 3 new Rangers and Liz, they were all here when any real work was going on, they were more in a supervisory and observational role. The work was being performed by subcontractors that were specialists in the trades working through a federal government-hired general contractor. So in this way, the team of Rangers were learning quite a lot. And Liz had just checked in with the 3, then headed out to do some routine inspections. And she was out to check a few of the more remote facilities today. Since there was only to be concrete block work done today, she had the freedom to get away from the job and left the trainees to observe the work. Liz decided to head out to inspect that region that had burned earlier in the summer. You remember we talked about that. Now, the Ranger parked in the same lot near the bathroom at the trailhead where she slipped and she fell and became unconscious, only to wake up in that cave up on the hill after being rescued by what she believed was a friendly Bigfoot. Though that was only a few months back, it was still a fresh memory and left many questions still unanswered. She shouldered her day pack, attached her bear spray and flashlight to her belt. She was feeling a little better prepared than usual. She even packed a pretty good lunch today. One of her new trainees, Cody, you remember him, he'd given her some elk summer sausage that he'd made. And oh boy, was it tasty. Being a hunter, he usually brought some tasty treats to share with his coworkers. Ranger Liz didn't really eat a lot of meat. It wasn't that she didn't like it, it was just that she preferred natural game. And she didn't hunt, so when the opportunity presented itself, she absolutely enjoyed it. So she started out from the parking lot along the same path that led her to the caves up on the ridge top a mile or so away. We talked about that as well. You know, that same trail that she'd used like 3 times now. So she hiked up to the ridge to try to find some answers in the cave before. If we remember, it was a nice hike through the tall trees. She was stepping well, and it felt good to be in the woods, just moving slowly and enjoying the hike. The Ranger reached the ridge line, and the view was just spectacular. Liz could see across that large canyon to the mountainside that had burned in the summer fire. What a sight. Black and gray. Though there would be some green grasses by next summer, it just looked like a wasteland today. Well, our Ranger Liz, she worked her way along the bouldery ridge until she found herself the large outcropping of rocks where the cave she remembered was. Now, this is where she'd woken up after falling and hitting her head, hard enough to go unconscious. Although it had been a couple months, the memories of that event hadn't fully returned. You see, she had a minor concussion, and that had fogged her thoughts for quite some time. I believe some of us carry those injuries for the rest of our lives. Our memories and our thought processes are sometimes forever altered. Does anyone have any thoughts on that? I know I do. I got my head conked pretty good not too many years ago, and boy, it changed me a bit. Kind of a strange deal. In Liz's case, she had found that she became more introspective, seemingly more aware of the things and the people she crossed paths with. See, that was maybe why Liz valued these moments where she could be alone. Alone in the woods even more. She cautiously approached the cave, not knowing what she expected to find, and, mildly disappointed when she found it empty, just as she had last seen it. She sat down on a flat rock in the cave and swung the day pack from her shoulders, figuring this would be a good time to have a drink of water and a snack. With a handful of trail mix and a cup of water, she rested. Not sure how long it had been, she realized that she'd been daydreaming for quite a while. Since she wanted to hike farther out the ridge in order to get a better view of the burn area, she loaded up her pack and she set out. As the ranger got further down the ridge, the foliage changed. The trees got smaller and bushier, and the brush got a lot thicker and harder. It was hardier brush. There were times that she was forced to backtrack to find a way through the thick brush. She wasn't on any main trail. She was just following a series of small game paths, just sort of whatever the least resistance was between the bushes. The going was so slow now, and the brush was so thick that the ranger wasn't really making any real headway. She seemed to be working her way around the perimeter of this large depression that she could see off to the side. It looked to be about 150 yards across, covered in thick brush, about 10 foot tall, and boulder piles everywhere. There was a spring sprouting from a rock outcropping where the water ran down along the ground for about 100 foot, forming small pools and feeding a little meadow. Strangely, the water seemed to disappear. The ranger was curious and followed the stream to a rock pile. The water ran into the ground through what looked to be a cave mouth. Now, this wasn't really unusual, as Liz knew that there were many underground streams and rivers in these mountains. She circled the rock pile and she came to a halt. Just in front of her, no more than 20 feet, was a well-used trail that ran right into the earth between two of the boulders. Our ranger Liz felt fear. The hair on the back of her neck was standing up and her eyes were darting around. Not sure why, but she was sure that she wanted out of there. Back up a few paces and moving away, as well as she could move in that thick brush surrounding the little oasis. She struggled with her pack, hanging up on every bush, making her progress slow and noisy. After 20 minutes of pushing through the brush and the trees were taller, and because less sun reached the forest floor because of the trees, there was less brush to wade through. She stopped and took her pack off, setting it on a low rock. She plopped down next to it. She closed her eyes, drawing a huge breath and holding it in while silently counting to 10, releasing the air from her lungs. She opened her eyes and looked fully around, relieved that she was still alone. Then she began to ponder what she'd seen. Though it was her district, she'd never been on that particular slope. The main trail was below that clearing by at least a half a mile, and the ridge tailed out above about a quarter mile. And because of the thick brush, there was no reason to traverse that slope. There was no known water source, except for what she found, so the hunters would have no thought as to what there'd be any game there. There was no good reason to be there. The water that came to the surface then disappeared into the cave complex made that really an exceptional spot. Whatever it was that used that trail and lived in that cave was probably never bothered by people. Well, Liz was thinking this would be a good experience for her 3 new trainees. With the 4 of them, they could safely explore the clearing and cave complex. It'd be a good team-building experience. She found the trail down the hill and walked the mile back to the parking lot. And driving out of the lot and down the hill, she vowed to make it happen the first chance possible. And so it was early the next week. The job was on hold, waiting for the roofing contractor to get some materials that he needed to roof the bathroom and the kiosk. Some sort of back order at the factory. You know how it is. Well, Ranger Liz saw this as the perfect opportunity for the 4 of them to go on a hike and do a little exploring. The team split up to perform facility inspections and met up in the parking lot at the trailhead by 10 in the morning. As per requirements, Liz held a quick safety meeting. They call them tailgate safety meetings. They all checked their equipment. There was bear spray, whistle, a belt knife or a folding knife, and they all carried their government-issued handheld radios. Besides that, all four had day packs with first aid equipment, lunch, and other essentials. Ranger Liz led them out away from the facility over the unmarked path that she had been on several times now. They would head to the cave where Liz lay after being rescued. Then they'd work their way down the ridge through the thick brush and hopefully be able to find that little clearing with the spring creek and the cave. So they walked for about an hour before coming to the ridge line. They stopped for water and decided to eat lunch. They sat around on the rocks and enjoyed the view across the drainage. Darius was silent as he ate his lunch, just staring at the vista that was the canyon and the two mountains beyond. He smiled at the others and said, "This sure ain't like Atlanta." When they had finished and shouldered their packs, they started out again, following Liz single file down the ridgeline. They stopped and caught their breath many times as they worked their way down that slope, as the brush got thicker and thicker, until their pace was just nearly a crawl. The three new rangers were all wondering what their boss had gotten them into and doubting it could be worth it, when just as Liz remembered, they broke through the outer ring of thick brush and stepped into a clearing with low brush and grasses. All three, and even Ranger Liz, were amazed at the beauty of this little oasis on the rough, dry hillside. None of them spoke as they all took in the splendor. They let their eyes travel over the grasses fed by the spring water, then to the little flooded creek that ran through a rocky flat and disappeared into a boulder pile halfway across the clearing. It reminded Cody of the football stadium at the high school in Twin Falls where he played 4 years varsity. This little natural bowl on the side of this mountain could fit the whole stadium, bleachers and all. They began to explore. Megan squatted down next to the creek and studied the water. She identified several insect species that were known to be food for the mountain brook trout found in this area. Though she didn't see any fish, she did believe that there could be some if they did a little more searching. The team worked their way up to the boulder pile, and then they worked their way around it, of course, and eventually they came to the opening between the boulders, and they were all curious as to the size and extent of the cave. The Rangers had a little conference and agreed to go in single file. It would be Liz, followed by Cody, then Darius would be near the mouth, and Megan would remain outside as sort of a safety officer. They had no idea how far back the cave went. They weren't really prepared to do any rappelling or going through any really tight passages, mostly just curious. They figured to get a basic look, and if it looked interesting, they'd come back with the proper gear for safe exploration. So Liz and Cody set their packs down, got out their flashlights, and they entered the cave mouth. Large enough to stand in, the entrance worked around a boulder to the right and began to descend at a fairly steep angle. The two rangers worked their way twisting and descending for a good 75 foot down into the earth. The creek from the clearing joined the passage and created a moist, cool atmosphere, running off to the side and just in sight of the explorers. As the cave passage turned back to the left into a fairly large chamber, maybe as big as your living room, with a ceiling that started just over their heads and just soared to over 25 foot or so across the room. As they panned their lights around the cave chamber, they could see that the floor dropped away 10 feet in front of the two. Then at the far edge of the room, there was a ledge and what looked like maybe would have been an opening beyond that. Well, Liz turned and talked with Cody, and they agreed that if they were to go any farther into this cave, that they would need some serious safety equipment. So, making their way back out, they told the other two rangers what they'd seen. And Cody led them both down one at a time to give them a look at the beauty of that cavern. As they repacked their gear and readied themselves for the hike out through the tough brush, they discussed and all agreed that they were interested in exploring that cavern more closely, but were all thinking that some serious planning would take place first. You see, this cave looked to have lateral passages and could have hidden caverns. So satisfied that they had a good experience, plenty of exercise, they worked their way back through the brush and toward the Forest Service pickups in the lot. The three trainees laughed about how their boss's little team-building exercise had left them all sore and scratched up from the extreme hike and the tough brush busting they'd done. Liz, however, she hadn't said much as they walked out. She was preoccupied. She's trying to digest the implications of what she'd found in the cave on a rock ledge. So Cody hadn't seen it as he was leading the way back to the surface. She wasn't sure she could share this information yet. But one thing that she was sure of, there was no mistaking the long-sleeve Reggae Fest t-shirt that she lost to that hairy beast. And folks, I was talking about how important companionship is. You can see that something like spelunking is not to be attempted without a companion. For safety reasons, of course. And campfires, they just warm your soul when you get to share them with others. So enjoy each other's company, folks. You never know when your last campfire will be. Until next time, this is Clay Steele. Good night, all. Well, howdy, friends. It's good to see so many new faces here tonight. Easter and all, it's people are traveling, but some of you, it looks like, have brought some family members and maybe some friends that you haven't seen in a while. Man, that makes it even more special. You might have noticed that the coffee is a little milder, not as bitter as it often is tonight. Well, now that's because we're boiling chicory coffee these days, and I'm really enjoying it. It still works as good, but it's a bit easier on the body. I've noticed my new mug. Well, it's the official Clay Steele Around the Campfire mug. What do you think of that? Pretty darn nice. And you can order one of our mugs. I'll send you a sample bag of our chicory coffee to try right along with it. Well, now the fire's really rolling now, and it's time to tell some stories. So fill up your mug, or go find a friend with a bottle and sit down next to him by the fire. That'll keep you warm. It's still a bit chilly around here. Well, I think it's time to give you an update on our friend Liz. You remember Liz? She's the forest ranger with the big friend. Well, she hadn't seen him and his new family since around Christmas. You remember there was a new baby? Well, Liz had decided to stay away and allow some privacy. There was a series of big storms that passed through that brought some deep snows with it. And roads were closed in the upper part of the park, and they had a good 5 or 6 foot of snow up there at that elevation. During the winter months, only lower essential roads are kept cleared and maintained in this park, and you know that, we've talked about it. Well, since Easter was coming, there'd been a week of nice, bright, sunny days. And so Liz, she packed up a lunch, and she threw her snowshoes in the back of her Subaru and planned on checking the road conditions up beyond the gates. Now, snow was still deep, but Liz hoped she'd be able to make the 2-mile trek up the road in her snowshoes, with the intention of leaving a little Easter basket of goodies at the cave entrance. She found a wicker basket in her linen closet, and she lined it with soft, oversized bath towel. She filled the basket with fruits, nuts, and carrots. She poured some of her homemade granola into a small paper bag, and she tucked that on along with a couple organic chocolate bars in the basket as well. It was a bit heavy. She realized she'd need a bigger pack than the usual day pack she normally carried. And digging around through her garage, she pulled out an old hard-shell frame pack. It was just the right size to fit the Easter basket in and her other essentials. And loading it into the car, she made a quick mental note to make sure she wasn't forgetting anything. Walking back into the kitchen, she took the magnetic notepad off the refrigerator and she jotted a quick note. Snowshoeing up to Grayson's Point Campground. She dated it She pulled it off the pad. She'd leave this one on the dashboard of her car and another one on the refrigerator. If anything happened to her, someone would find the note in her vehicle or here at the house. Smart thinking, she told herself. Yeah, and I agree with her. Well, she made sure her cat had food and water and the dishes, and, well, she locked the door and got on out to her car. It was a clear, beautiful morning. Liz turned on the radio and began singing along with her favorite tunes. She was excited with the possibility of seeing that strange creature who had become her friend, and yet she still felt a little apprehensive of the danger. When encountering any wild creature, a healthy dose of caution, well, it's always a good idea. It took Liz a good 40 minutes to drive to the lower gate. The sun had warmed the road, so it was nice and clear, but a deep bank of snow still lying alongside. The snowplow had cleared a turnaround spot on the right side of the gate, and it was a perfect spot just to park your car. There were 2 other cars parked in the semicircle. Most likely they were cross-country skiers. Now, the cave where she'd last seen the Bigfoot was a good 2 miles farther up the road from the lower gate, which was kept closed and padlocked through the winter. Folks still got to enjoy cross-country skiing or snowmobiling up beyond the gate, but rarely went as far as the cave. They mostly stayed down in the meadows. Now, just off to the right, through a small group of trees, there was a large open meadow that was a favorite location for cross-country skiing. The shape of the land formed a natural bowl that filled with snow, and it received enough sunshine to create a nice crust on the snow. Just perfect for cutting a nice straight line with your skis. At the far end of the meadow, there was a semi-narrow passage. Then it opened up again, revealing a secondary meadow, larger than the first, and it created a perfect figure-8 loop for the skiers. Now, Liz had skied it many times over the years. It was a good exercise, and she wondered why she hadn't been out yet this season. She made a mental note to return soon, maybe even next weekend. Bring her skis with her. Maybe she'd see if Cody or Megan or even Darius would like to join her. She thought about her interns. Cody, being from Twin Falls, Idaho, had plenty of snow experience and so she figured he was probably a skier. Darius, now he was from south of Atlanta, and Megan was from Manhattan, so there was a good chance they might never have been on cross-country skis. Now, anyone who loves the outdoors has probably been downhill skiing several times, but Nordic skiing was just not as popular for some reason. But Liz loved the quiet serenity of it, the peacefulness, the beauty. It wasn't anything like them busy ski resorts with all the people dressed in their expensive designer ski jackets and snow pants. The best thing about cross-country skiing, Liz thought, was that you could just pull your skis out of the back of the car just about anywhere that had enough snow. No long lines, no expensive tickets, just the freedom to go wherever you wanted. Liz's mind wandered as she trekked up the path that would once again be a road once the snow melted off. And one thing about snowshoeing is it sure is a slower pace. Liz had already walked about a mile, and she was feeling just a little fatigued. She'd been climbing uphill at a pretty steady pace, carrying a heavy backpack, so she wasn't surprised. She decided to stop near a large boulder and take a small break. Now, Liz knew the danger of getting too close to a tree. A tree well that's a space around a tree under its branches that doesn't get the same amount of snow as the open space around the tree. And this creates kind of a void, a funnel, or an area of real loose snow below the branches around the trunk. That's dangerous to anyone who falls into them. If someone lands in a well, it can be too deep for them to climb up the surrounding loose snow before they're buried. And if the snow's deep enough, the surrounding snowbank can collapse over them, and it just suffocates them. But what Liz didn't think of is that this same phenomenon can occur near rocks and along streams. So seeing a nice flat boulder jutting up out of the snow a few yards off the trail there, Liz made her way to the big rock, thinking she'd just stop there and eat her lunch and take a break. And just as she neared the rock, she felt the crust of the snow break under her feet, and her body plowed down a deep hole, knocking the ski pole from her hand. Her pack caught the snow at a weird angle, causing her head to slam forward right into the rock. Her hand grasped for the rock as she felt her body slide further into the snow. It was the backpack that kept her from falling deeper, but now she was at an awkward angle, her upper body clinging to the rock with her legs twisted underneath her, the snowshoes crossed and pointing in angles that were just deeply buried in the snow. Now she struggled to regain her footing, but the weight of the snow was pressing down on her legs, making movement difficult. Afraid she would slide further into the hole, she just grasped at the rock, trying to find fingerhold. Panic was beginning to set in as she realized she couldn't free her legs. The more she struggled, the deeper she sank. The loose snow cascading down around her. Snow wedged up her back, between her coat and the backpack, threatening to pull it away from her body, and yet keeping her from falling deeper into the snow. She tried to stifle her fear, calm her breathing, find a solution to the predicament she now found herself in. Taking deep, calming breaths, she tried again to free her foot, even just move it a little. Now, she did a mental assessment of her body. Nothing seemed to be broken, but blood was running down her forehead, across her eyelid, and dripping down her cheek. She knew she had hit the rock hard with her head. It was beginning to throb a little bit. Now, how could I be so stupid, she thought to herself. It'll be days before anybody finds me. I can't believe I'm this stuck. The more she struggled, the worse the situation got. She didn't know how much time had passed. She'd kind of lost some there. Her legs were growing numb from the cold. Her fingers hurt from hanging onto the rock. Still, she couldn't move. She thought back to her training in forestry school. She'd been required to take a class in avalanche training, and somewhere she'd read about experiments conducted in North America where 90% of the volunteers who were temporarily placed in tree wells, they were unable to rescue themselves. They would have just died there. Well, normally the snowbank collapses over them and suffocates them. If a partner is not there for immediate rescue, the skier or the rider, if they're a snowmobiler or in this case, somebody walking on snowshoes, they may die very quickly from suffocation. In many cases, he or she can die as quickly as someone can drown in water. According to the Tree Well and Snow Immersion Suffocation website, that is. Ironic, she thought, that she should remember that now, word for word. It's been years since I took that class in avalanche safety. Obviously, I should have taken a refresher course, she thought. Now, she knew there was no use in calling for help. There'd be no one close enough to hear. She'd just be wasting energy and maybe panicking herself. She thought about her phone in the pocket of her coat, but she was afraid to let go of that rock and try to get a hold of her phone. She'd have just pitched head down. The snow had obviously drifted up against this rock, and she had no idea how deep that hole was that she was now stuck in. She leaned her head on the rock and she began to cry. It seemed that hours had passed when she thought she heard a sound in the trees a small distance away. Her throat was parched, but she managed to yell out, "Help me," in a small, weak voice. Looking towards the tree line, she thought she could see some movement. She tried calling again, louder this time, "Help!" To her amazement, she saw a giant, furry beast emerge from the darkness of the trees. Taller than a bear, larger than a man even, she thought she recognized her friend, the Bigfoot. Was she imagining all this? Hoping it was indeed the one who had rescued her from a previous fall, she knew that there was nothing that she could do but watch it as it cautiously came toward her, lumbering through the snow. She had seen her friend, the Bigfoot, several times now. She knew the stories of how dangerous and aggressive these creatures are, and how rarely they're sighted. But there was no mistaking that this one, the one that she had seen through a couple of seasons now, did not appear to be a threat to her safety. As she waited, well, what else could she do? Watching as it got nearer, she'd realized she'd never seen him this close before. his huge body sunk in the snow as he came closer to the rock. Suddenly, the thought crossed her mind that he, too, might get trapped in this snow well, or his movement might make the snow engulf her further. As he took his steps closer, he sunk again. He stopped, looking around him, and he retreated back from where he came. "Don't leave," she cried out, but he only disappeared for a moment, returning with a large, broken branch. Coming close to Liz once again, he stood back a few yards and held the branch toward her. Carefully, Liz released her grip from the rock and grabbed the tree branch, one hand first and then the other. The Bigfoot gently pulled the branch, and Liz could feel her snowshoes untangling from the twisted angles they were in, and she let herself be dragged through the snow until she was once again on the frozen crust and she could gain her footing. Liz started crying big tears of relief and gratitude. "Thank you," she cried out as the Bigfoot turned to retreat back into the woods. There, at the edge of the tree line, barely visible in the shadows, stood another of the giant creatures, holding the young one in her arms. "Wait," she cried. The sound of her cry made the Bigfoot turn and look towards her. She slid the backpack off, reached into the bag, and pulled out the Easter basket she had made. She sat it on the snow in front of her. Tears filled her eyes. "Thank you," she said softly. She turned and she followed her tracks back toward the direction she'd come. Several yards away, she turned and looked back towards her friends. The basket was gone, and so were they. Well, that was a pretty good story, and nice to have an update. I hope you enjoyed it. We'll hear more of our Ranger Liz in the months to come, and we have a Bigfoot story by one of our listeners that we'll be telling you starting this next week. It's about Thomas Robinette, the Bigfoot hunter, and it was written by Joe Flippo, one of our listeners. So listen in this week and we'll be starting the story. And be looking for those mugs I was telling you about. You got to try this here coffee. Until then, happy Easter, everyone. Well, what a surprise to see so many of you here tonight. I see lots of new faces, and welcome to all of you. I'm glad we're all here at the campfire. Now, you may know and you may not know, but tonight is the 1-year anniversary of the Hidden Corners podcast. That's right, 12 months back, Ginger Winters launched this project. She really wanted to share some stories to entertain y'all, and that she has. There have been a few changes over the months, always with the listeners' interest in mind, but I don't see any signs of Ginger slowing down. So I'm pretty sure that you'll find the same types of stories and content here at the Hidden Corners podcast for quite some time into the future. Now, before we get started telling stories tonight, I want to tell you that Ginger's added a merchandise store here. So you can find it on the Hidden Corners homepage, and you may be able to find it on the description for this story. You can find mugs with a logo on it, and chicory coffee to go in it. You can also find some other products. Now, get settled, find a spot to sit down, get you something in your mug, and I'll start. You might be happy to know I got a Ranger Liz update. Yeah, this just happened, so it's new to me too. There hasn't been much to report from Liz and her part of the forest. Seems like everyone's just been taking care of business. Liz and her troop of forest rangers have been busy in preparations for the summer tourist season, you see. Now that would entail repairs from winter damage to the facilities like the parking areas and the toilets, the kiosks and the buildings and the roads. There's just a lot to do. Now, when the tourists start showing up around Memorial Day, things are pretty much non-stop busy until sometime in September, when the families start staying home in preparation for getting their kids to school. And with the 4th of July just around the corner, the facilities are running at their max. And you're likely to run into people just about anywhere. Now, while most people camp around the lakes, the streams, where there's more flat ground for campsites. Now, strangely enough, when people from the city go into the forest to camp, well, they end up surrounded by people doing the same thing. And I guess it's just what you're used to. So while most of the time people are found reasonably close to the campgrounds, there's always a few hardy souls for which the crowds have no appeal, and instead they crave the beauty of solitude. By themselves or in small groups, these campers hike out for overnight trips. And on these forays are where most wildlife encounters occur. For most of us, watching a bear or a small herd of deer is what makes for a memorable trip into the woods. That is why some people make the extra effort to venture away from the crowds. And so it was for 57-year-old Michael Carter. He was a banker. He was on a short holiday for the weekend before the 4th of July. He thought it best that he would do a reasonably short 2-night backpack trip. He would park his car in the main parking lot near the ranger's headquarters. And the trail system was extensive throughout this part of the park, so he would walk away from his car and within 5 miles be away from it all, but except for a very few people. He planned to put on another 2 or 3 miles the first day, putting him on a high ridge that was far away from most tourists and afforded just the best views. There were no campfires allowed in the summer months in the wilderness portions of the park, so Michael, like other backpackers, carried a small alcohol-fueled stove, which he used to boil water that was added to his freeze-dried food. And that's all it really takes nowadays. Really pretty damn good. Not much like the freeze-dried foods from the 60s and the 70s, which were pretty sketchy in my opinion. Now, my family always backpacked when I was still a child, so I had my share of that early backpacking foods. Nowadays, however, the foods are really good. Most entrees are packaged in foil pouches. You simply open the pouch and you add boiling water. Wait a few minutes and you eat your meal just right out of the pouch, you see. Now we're talking all types of food too, like stroganoff's a favorite. I saw chicken and rice, curry, chicken and dumplings, and steaks. Yeah, even steaks. Really just about any food can be freeze-dried. It costs a bit more, but it's pretty tasty. Well, he made it to the parking lot by about 2:30 on Friday afternoon. Set out on the trail for the wilderness. He made it to the ridgetop by around 7. It was a pretty hard uphill hike, and he started looking for a good campsite, a perfect spot. A sandy area surrounded by low boulders on the ridge with views all the way around. He set up his tent and unloaded his sleeping gear and spread it all out. And you see, I was taught long ago by a wise man to set up your bed before you started doing anything else. Now that first evening was just right, as Michael, seated with his back against one of the boulders, ate his beef stroganoff and drank fruit juice. And what a night's sleep he had after walking those miles to the ridgetop. This is why I love to backpack, he thought, as he fell asleep. Just about 3 miles away, a hairy giant beast strode through the forest, carrying a deer carcass over his shoulder. The king of all he surveyed, he moved smoothly with purpose through the trees. He was content in knowing that his hunting success that night would feed his small family for several days. His child was growing so fast and required quite a bit of nourishment. While still nursing from his mother, the young Sasquatch would still eat almost 4 pounds of meat a day. It was almost a full-time job gathering greens from the forest glade and hunting meat to nourish the 3 of them. Because of this, he roamed far and wide. Mother and son would venture out into the forest, mostly in the morning, late afternoon. The female squatch would be hunting seeds and herbs and so many of the other essentials to be found. The boy, like any boy, would be exploring, never more than a few 100 feet from his mother. Very similar to the arrangement between a sow grizzly and her cubs. The cubs are pretty tough, and only an apex predator would attempt to take one. But with one squall from the cub, one of the most ferocious animals, if not the most ferocious, in all of North America is coming, and there's going to be hell to pay. Well, it's not going to be any less dramatic if this female Sasquatch senses danger. Ripping and biting at her prey, there are no animals that would survive the attack except for the largest and the meanest of the bears. When not in the forest near their cave, they would retire into the cavern to water and rest. Their life was idyllic. Liz woke up Saturday morning and just sat down with her big mug of steaming coffee, sat in her chair and just began to think of the day ahead of her. She had to go into the office for a few hours to clean up some paperwork and fill out the July labor assignment schedule. She planned on being done by noon, and she might take a short hike, or she really wanted to go fishing on a little creek she knew of that didn't get much pressure, and it held some really nice native cutthroats. And your presentation had to be flawless or they wouldn't even look at your fly. Now, she'd been 3 times to this little section of creek, and she'd only managed to catch 2 of these beautiful, skittish little fish. The challenge was real, and Liz did enjoy the chance to test herself. So she took her time, and she made it into the Forest Service complex by 9 o'clock in the morning. At about the same time, Michael had finished breakfast and broke camp. Shouldering his backpack, he took a last look around to make sure he left no signs of his overnight habitation. Satisfied, he started slowly down the ridge. Now, he intended to leave the ridge and head down slope, intersecting an established trail, then following this trail down to Bond Lake, a small creek-fed pond where he planned on camping his second night, and leaving an easy 4-mile hike back to his car. The last half of it would be downhill. Now, this trail that he would cross, it originates at the parking lot where months before Liz had been rescued by her big-footed friend. In fact, unbeknownst to Michael, he would be trekking through the thick, brushy badlands surrounding the Bigfoot family's cave home. As the morning wore on, it was getting warm, and walking through the thick brush was difficult, with his pack snagging on the thorny bushes with every step. Now, Michael had always planned well, so he carted 2 liters of water, and now that would have been plenty if he were following an established path. But that wasn't the case. While the hiker was stopped and sitting on his pack, drinking well into his 2nd liter of water, he saw the bush in front of him, what he thought was the elderberry bush, sporting beautiful purple berries. Though bitter, he craved something to flavor his mouth and help him slake his thirst. Well, this might have worked, but as he was eating his 2nd handful of berries, he just started the countdown of his demise. The bush was not an elderberry, but the pokeweed bush, always toxic, often fatal, depending on how much you ate and how big and strong you are, and maybe just your luck too. Generally speaking, Michael was in big trouble. Shouldering his pack, he continued on through the brush. Within an hour, the poison had started to take its effect. He was sweating profusely, and he noticed a slight dizziness. Tilting his water bottle for a drink and being shocked that it was empty, how long it had been empty. Struggling to remember, and finally realizing it didn't matter. What did matter was finding a stream or a spring and try to satisfy his intense thirst. Crashing through the thick brush like a madman, he continued on for what seemed like forever. Every minute now seemed like forever. He thought he could go on no farther and was on the verge of losing his mind when the brush began to thin and he broke through into paradise. A large meadow with a creek and a few large piles of boulders. Everything was spinning now, and Michael was concentrating on staying focused. His mind was sorting through memories of his childhood. He felt sick. The water, he thought. Bellowing like a wounded animal, he tried to run towards the creek. Maybe 70 feet between him and that beautiful spring water. But as he struggled forward, the distance seemed to get greater. What was happening, he wondered. On his knees now, still had 20 feet to go, he began to vomit, and he had strange sensations of no longer being overheated, but he felt as though he was in a snowfield. Now he'd quit sweating. He was in really bad shape now. The last thing he remembered was feeling a sense of loss. He had so much more to do in his life. He wasn't ready to go. Closer to death than ever before in his life, he had made it to within a few feet of the creek. Liz had finished her paperwork up and was locking her desk. She made her way to the parking lot and into her Forest Service pickup. And being a manager, she was permitted to drive the Dodge truck home after work. It did save wear and tear on her Subaru. Of course, she always felt like she was a forest ranger and would be called upon to be responding to emergency events from wherever she was. So the take-home truck was a justified cost. She swung out onto the road and headed to her secret fishing spot for more lessons. The female Sasquatch sat peacefully near the creek, watching her young son playing in the water. He was growing so fast, she thought. He's developing so rapidly, and he learns almost intuitively. He will grow up to be just as smart and strong as his father. She stopped weaving the mat she was working on when she smelled the scent of a human. Calling her son with a low guttural growl, he came immediately. He knew he'd better. Taking her weaving and ushering her child ahead of her, she headed for the pile of boulders where the entrance to their cave was. They weren't used to people finding this meadow. It was just too remote and too difficult to approach. So this possible intrusion was alarming. Very few humans had ever been here. Now Liz had discovered it, much like Michael had, by accident. And except for Liz bringing her 3 trainees to show them her discovery, the last human the Bigfoot encountered here were over 200 years ago. It was a small hunting party of 3 braves on a trek. They were killed and eaten by the family of Sasquatch living in the cave system then. And that line of Sasquatch had died out before Liz's friend found the cave. When she reached the safety of the cave mouth, she leaned her head back and bellowed, really like a loud scream. This was to alert her mate of the danger that was nearby. And within a few minutes of her scream, she saw a human struggling through the brush on the perimeter of the meadow. He didn't look well to her as he stumbled and staggered into the meadow. Then, when he growled and made a lunge for the creek, she watched closely as he fell just short. Well, he was in bad shape and probably would be dead soon. Her call to her mate had been heard. He was on the ridge when he heard it. Running at full speed, he was ready to kill anything in his path to get to his family. As he got closer and closer, his rage grew, and he only began to calm down after he had them both in his arms. He saw the motionless body of the hiker as he ran to his mate and child, and had Michael moved at all, he would have been torn apart limb by limb. Once the family was safe and secure, he moved to the fallen man and saw the pokeberries that Michael had vomited as he struggled to get the last few feet to the creek. The great beast saw the slight rise of the body as a small, shallow breaths were taken. The Squatch didn't recognize this man, but knew that he was still alive and needed the poultice from the 5 special plants and herbs to counteract the bad that eating the pokeberries had done. He and his mate, working together, were able to build and begin administering the poultice within a few minutes. They removed the backpack and carried Michael's body to a shady spot where he could heal if it were possible. Though the Squatch will use the pokeberries as a hallucinogenic to see the past and the future, they're always very careful not to overdose. And it wasn't until late that night when they began to think that this human would live past morning. Ever so curious, the little one, he was about 3 foot tall at the time, had looked through the backpack and touched and tasted everything. Mom was too busy to keep a close eye on him. It was the second human that he'd ever seen. He had seen Liz once when he was just a baby. So the great beast decided that he would carry Michael to the trailhead parking lot, figuring that he would begin to get much better now, since he was rehydrated and the hallucinogenic effects of the pokeweed were wearing off, thanks to the poultice. Leaving the human where other humans would find him and could help him to recover, and pretty sure Michael had been so sick that he would have no real memory of seeing the Squatch family, since their safety was on line. The trip took almost 1.5 hours. Now, Michael wasn't a big man and he was traveling light. And depositing the human in the toilet building, the giant was home to his family by 2 in the morning. Liz had just pulled the truck on the side of the road where the creek crossed underneath when she got a call on her cell phone from the front desk at the Forest Service office. "You might want to come and talk to this man. He has an interesting story," Carol at the desk told her. "Okay, Carol. Thanks. I'll be there in 15 minutes. She shook her head, started the truck back up. "Surely these fish are going to be here when I get back," she laughed to herself. Liz brought Michael into her office and offered him a seat, a cup of coffee. She listened to his story, how he'd seemed to have eaten what he thought were elderberries and then went into convulsions and began to hallucinate. "I guess I had a reaction to the berries, and add to that I became dehydrated. I really don't remember walking the last 2.5 miles down to the trailhead. I did have some wild hallucinations though, like what?" Liz prompted him. "Well, I remember a meadow. It's like an oasis, a regular Eden, and a creek running across with the most beautiful clear water gurgling in the bed. The thing is, the creek came out of the side of the hill and then seemed to disappear into a pile of boulders a few hundred feet away. Now, I tried to get to the creek. I was dying of thirst. I must have made it. I mean, I'm here, aren't I? And my water bottles were full when I woke up in the bathrooms at the trailhead. But I lost more than 12 hours of my life. Wild dreams of floating through the forest with the stars brightly shining, and hearing voices speaking a mysterious language. And weirdest of all, I would wake up to the vision of a short, hairy man poking me with a stick, and then slip away again. That happened several times." After Liz let Michael finish his story, she told him, "It sounds like you ate some pokeberries. Now, they're known to be hallucinogenic. It sounds like your imagination really went wild. You are lucky to be alive for sure. They can be toxic enough to be fatal. I suggest you get some rest and drink lots of water." As Michael left her office, she once again locked her desk up and headed to the parking lot. She needed to get to town. She was going to buy oranges and bananas and as much food as she thought she could carry on her pack. It would be a reward of sorts given to her favorite family of the forest. Yeah, I think Liz was glad to have an excuse to possibly see this Bigfoot family again. It had been a while. Well, does anyone else have a story to tell tonight? You know, if you send a good story to us here at the Hidden Corners podcast, we would love to read it here around the campfire, to be sure. We always will find a story to tell you. I enjoyed your company tonight. I want to thank you for coming around for the last year. Now, folks, be happy for what we've got, because there's always someone worse off, and maybe we can help them. So until next time, this is Clay Steele. Good night.